What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming back at you with Mort Jensen of the NBA podcast fame, of Yahoo Sports fame, of Forbes' fame, and of OnlyFans celebrity. We are here to wrap up our series of our biggest questions for every NBA team entering the free agency offseason period. We'll probably have to do like one to check back in the middle of the summer after some stuff is settled. We're on to the Central Division, which ends up being pretty timely today, more because of the trade between the Bulls and the Cavs. So we'll get into each side of it for them as we get to those teams. As a note, we know since we're live streaming now, our levels have been all jacked up all over the place. So if you're in the comments and you want to let us know whether Mort is too loud or I'm too low or vice versa, feel free to let us know. If it's good enough, like, let's not nitpick here. It's a live stream. So we tried to match our levels beforehand, and audio people get to see me match it in post. Mort, before we dive in, how the heck are you?
Well, I was doing pretty well, and then you told me it's definitely my fault that the levels were off. Now I'm a little insulted, actually.
That was my intention, so that makes me feel really good about how I pose that message then.
Great.
We begin alphabetically. The Chicago Bulls, your Chicago Bulls, excuse me.
Oh, don't
everybody.
you dare. I'll walk off this live stream immediately.
So before we get into the questions, let's talk about their side of the trade with the Cavs.
Right.
They flipped. It was straight up. Like, you very rarely just see just player for player. That's it. We're done. They traded Lonzo Ball, who has 2 years and $20 million left on his deal, but I think the second's a team option. And they're bringing back Isaac Okoro, who has 2 years left on the deal that he signed with the Cavs last offseason. What do you make of this for the Bulls, Mort?
Well, first things first, for the Bulls, it's not really that uncommon to make one-for-one trades. See Alex Caruso, Josh Giddey. So,
That's a really good point.
Look, I actually don't hate it for the Bulls but I'm also grading it on a curve. Like, I'm grading the Bulls on a curve because, like, whenever they do something, it's so mindlessly stupid that this, in comparison, is like fine. Like, they shore up their wing situation, which I actually think is perfectly reasonable. Like, having wings is not a bad thing. And Okoro, in my personal opinion, was a little bit underutilized by the Cavs, I feel like. I know he's not a high-volume three-point shooter. I know he's not an elite defender, but I think he's a solid defender, and I think he's a solid three-point shooter. I know he's 24, so you're not exactly expecting him to, like, level up significantly, but I don't think he is, quote-unquote, a finished product. So we'll see. I just don't mind him at that contract either. It's like $22.8 million for the next 2 years. That's just not a bad gamble. And this was what the Bulls intended to do when they extended Lonzo. They wanted to flip him for something else. Now, what we can talk about is how there might have been superior offers out there that he shouldn't have taken instead. And that is fair criticism. But in terms of what they got back, if we were just judging this trade in a vacuum, it was all right.
Yeah, I definitely don't have a problem with it on the scale of Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. So that's certainly fair to say. I also think that, as you mentioned, it kind of feels more of a positional void where you trust Isaac Okoro to guard up a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it feels relatively uninspiring because when you look at the Lonzo Ball contract, like, it feels like you could have used it as a vehicle to acquire something better, where it's, could you have traded him? Like, could you have been a part of the Grizzlies when they were looking to dump Marcus Smart last year and gave up a first-round pick? And in this situation, the leverage, like, it almost feels like they treated Isaac Okoro as the better player for them. And it's just the Cavs wanted to get off this money, and we'll get into the Cavs in a minute, but because they're in the second apron, Ty Jerome, paying him is probably prohibitive at this point. And now, kind of in Lonzo, you replace some of his minutes. He does stuff that's different. You upgrade your defense, probably upgrade your shooting a little bit. Maybe you downgrade your just half-court playmaking and on-ball stuff. So it felt like the Cavs needed this more than the Bulls did, and it just feels like when you look at their returns, just in sum, for DeMar DeRozan, for Zach LaVine, for for Alex Caruso, this isn't, I want to make it clear, it's not on this level, but it's just every single trade is underwhelming. And it can't always be, oh, well, the market said what the market said. And I think it's more a matter of timing, or in this case, I just think that this is again, not bad, but just sort of a meh negotiation process by Chicago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's their brand, right? If we look at it, Levine, DeMar, Caruso, and now Lonzo as well. Those 4 players collectively brought back 1 first-round draft pick, which originally was Chicago's own. Now, if you just add that up, that's a mess. Like, if you can't even extract more assets out of that foursome, yeah, absolutely. But I think the reason I'm not, up in arms about this is, like I said, I'm grading them on a curve. I had 0 expectations. The fact that they didn't sell off Lonzo Ball for magic beans is sort of a win. That's where we are. I have absolutely 0 expectation of them at this point. We're at that stage, like, oh, is it Mad Men in that series in the elevator where someone goes like, I think you're dumb, and the other one says like, that's funny. I don't think of you at all. Like something along those lines. That's how I feel about the Bulls at this point, where when they do something that's just not egregious, I'm like, oh, okay, thumbs up, which is horrible in its own way, because that means you're kind of training everyone to be content with moves that are uninspiring.
Which, look, that's fair. And I think, Isaac Okoro kind of fills a positional need for them. He's like proven to be at points like more of an offensive weapon than Patrick Williams too. So does he come in? And I mean, when you look at their roster, he's immediately, I think you probably could have argued that Lonzo Ball was their best 3-and-D guy. And now you're kind of, if you want to assume Ayo Dosunmu's still that, but you now have Isaac Okoro as your best 3-and-D guy when you look at how he shot the 3-ball last year. I've just been uninspired a lot of the time. And maybe this isn't a concern that Chicago's worried about, but like how he fits in the postseason, the limitations, the limitations that that he poses on your offense in those situations. But if they think, look, he's shown some feel like on the ball or at least making passes, and if they want to, I think if you were looking at this to kind of as an encouraging move, it's like kind of showing that, oh, maybe the Bulls are signaling that they're gonna take more of a future focused or slightly bigger picture approach to this season, and that's a win in itself.
Yeah. While we're doing this podcast, I wouldn't be shocked if another trade went down, because Casey Johnson, pictured here on the live stream, has reported that there's a lot of chatter about Ayo Dosunmu. So we'll see. It seems like he's on the move as well. We'll
I would like him on the Knicks. How do we get him there?
Dude, I would like Ayo on like 20 different teams. Can we just like find a way to split him into 20 parts, because he'd help so many teams. It's especially in depth purposes situations. Like, this guy can play the 1, he can play the 2. In a pinch, you can even play him at the freaking 3.
He could guard 4s, as far as I'm concerned, too.
Yeah, I would trust him to do that in spot minutes for sure. He can handle the ball. He can play off the ball. I mean, he's very good. He's just not, a high-end starting caliber player. So that's why I think he's a little tough to peg trade value-wise. So we'll see.
Hein in the chat, at least they're not Pelicans level stupid. Not this time. Although, Mort, you weren't on that podcast, but we're catching a lot of shit on YouTube because we didn't say that Derek Queen is going to be a bust for the Pelicans. We were just like, why would you ever give up your 2026 protected pick?
Right.
And the justifications in the comments are just, one, there. Some of them are rude, which is just like, okay, like we're talking about, but they just don't make sense. Where it's, they're probably figuring if they tear it down, like you have Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears and Trey Murphy. Okay, that's great. But if you get to a point where you need to tear it down, you're probably going to want to have kept that pick that you traded away.
I mean, it's not about the Pelicans. This is about the Bulls, but it's about the process. It's not about the results necessarily. I mean, you whenever you make a trade, you have to look at it through the perspective of value at that moment. I mean, again, so just going back, well, we can actually tie the Bulls into this one. So Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso, right? Like that trade last year. Even if Josh Giddey becomes an MVP this upcoming season, it's entirely reasonable to go back to when the trade occurred and said, well, you still did not get enough for Alex Caruso at that given time. You should have extracted more. Mm-hmm. It's a process question. And people are so quick to forgive a trade if a player like unexpectedly explodes and becomes a thing. Then they're like, oh, that's a great trade. No, you have to look at it in context. Like, you have to have the nuance and understand where was this team at that specific point in time and gauge the trade off of that. And Derek Queen giving up a future unprotected first, like 2026 first, for the right to pick Derek Queen, who, let's be real, a non-D and non-3 center at this point, like that could change, but so far, not exactly super encouraging. That's a gamble.
It's an unnecessary risk. Like, sort of, with the Bulls and Josh Giddey, I think you could at least say the peak version of Josh Giddey. He was just so young that it was easier to justify here. And I know Derek Queen is young in that context. But with this deal, I think what I'm and we have to, you talk about the Lonzo trade already. We're going to get to it more with the Cavs, I think, but we already did talk about it, what it means for the Bulls. But I'm actually about to talk about it again because Hines says, excited to see Giddey's second season with the Bulls. One, I'd like to know how much is Josh Giddey making in his second season. If it's $30 million, But the other thing is, as one of your better floor spacers, and I know he didn't play a ton of minutes, Isaac Okoro does worse than that. And so for someone like Giddey, you want to have enough floor spacing around him. And so that's something they need to be cognizant of as they move. If they move Vooch, if they move Kobe White, like, you're going to weaken, you've weakened your shooting ranks here. And again, they have Kevin Huerter. That's also fine for where they're at. But if you're trying to optimize Josh Giddey, you would feel better about having more floor spacing around there. I think this kind of ties in, though, like at a point where your question, Mort, which is, does this trade do anything to clarify your question for you, or is it still the same question?
No, it's still, do they have a plan? But I want to respond to your spacing comment here, because here's the thing. We have to already right now heavily assume that's the spacing in Chicago is going to dramatically decline next season compared to this year. Because, again, we talked about this before. They, out of nowhere, fired Peter Patton, the architect of Chicago's newfound shot profile. And why did they fire him? Because he did not agree with the way that Arturas Karnisovas saw things, which, again, underlines that the Bulls want
he was too intelligent for the room, it sounds like.
Correct. That's not, you're laughing, but that's not even a joke. That's truly a relevant thing to note. And, they drafted Noah Esenge, not a shooter, not a natural shooter by any stretch of the imagination.
A lot of, sorry to interject now, but like a lot of just positional defensive flexibility on this team now with him and Modest Buzelis and Isaac Okoro, of course. And of course, Ayo, he's still there too.
But see, that's interesting. So not you want, but like the team could be looking at a complete flip of priorities. So this season, they were like, okay, let's just shoot the shit out of the ball, right? Let's take a ton of threes. I think they were third in the league in 3-point attempts. Like, that was just offense. Let's push. Now you're going into next year, and it's probably going to be, defense and like minimal floor spacing. So again, what the fuck is your identity as a team if you flip-flop that way? Because if you go back, not to this year, but last year, it was sort of like, let's try both at the same time without really being good at neither. So, like, at some point, you're going to need to be able to hang your hat on something. Like, the players will have to know, what type of system are we coming into? What type of system can we expect on a year-to-year basis? Now, if you're just running around taking a million threes the one year and then going, oh yeah, we have no spacing next year, but we'll be good defensively. What type of team are you? You're going to have a major identity crisis.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, that's more, I don't want to say forgivable, but it's easier to explain if the Bulls end up, and this would be like my question, like, what are they going to do with the rest of their expiring contracts? You mentioned Ayo already. They have Vooch. They, of course, have Kobe White. So if you're going to start to move those guys, getting away from last season's identity, yeah, you'd like players that are going to fit it. But if you're kind of beginning this quasi-rebuild or something, it's more understandable to say, okay, we're not trying to mirror what last year's team did because we're going to look so different, and we're not necessarily caring. We care more about the process of the roster building than the process of what's happening on the court, at least for this season. But to your general question, or the question you're posing here, is that the route the Bulls are going? Because they've now traded a bunch of players that people wanted them to trade. When you look at Zach LaVine, when you look at DeMar DeRozan, even Alex Caruso, and now Lonzo Ball, and you still don't know. Like, having traded 4 of those guys, and still maybe not knowing, like, what the Bulls' overarching direction is, like, that's a little concerning.
Really good point. Really, really good point. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the smoke and gun right there, because like you want to be able to understand what a team is trying to do. Like, if we just take on the perspective of a fan base, right? They want to know, what should we root for this year? Because, like, look, I grew up a Bulls fan. I know Bulls fans. If the organization came out and said, look, we're going to enter into like a fully fledged rebuild, you'll have a passionate fan base that's just like, great, that's a direction. We will root for losses, and we will buy tickets, and we will buy jerseys in the meantime to support you, because that is the right way to go. Fans are like completely checked out. Like, the apathy, the level of apathy for Bulls fans at this point has never been higher, because, like us, they have no idea what to think of this team. They're like, oh, so Josh Giddey is, so should we root for him to become a franchise player? Like, is that the thing? What are we aiming for here? The playoffs next year? Are we aiming for the East Finals? What is the plan? Where are we going? Are we taking a step backward? No one knows. And the Bulls themselves, this is the most discouraging part. At the trade deadline, after the trade deadline, the team more or less came out and said, yes, we have to formulate a plan. What? You played half a season, you still don't have a plan? You still don't have anything, like, you can't use your
concepts of a plan.
Right. Right. And like, oh yeah, we need 8 or 9 good players. Great. Everything is so vague. It's so lazy. I just feel bad for fans at this point. This is supposed to be a global super brand in all of sports, and it's a mom and pop shop that's doing poorly, by the way. It's not one of those mom and pop shops where everyone goes down on a Saturday afternoon and goes, oh, we love to be here. No, it's the mom and pop store that everyone is kind of, we don't really want to go in, because Pops is kind of a creepo, right? Like, that's the type of store they have, which, why would you want to try to build something on that? Like, they have no foundation. Ownership doesn't give a fuck. I mean, our George Karnisovas, I will also say, is in handcuffs. Same with Mark Eversley. Like, they are not allowed to do a whole bunch of things, and they get extensions because they are just yes men as well. That's how the Bulls operate. It's very depressing. And to answer my own question, is there even a plan? A resounding no. A resounding no. There isn't a plan. There's a concept of a plan, I guess, and that concept looks pretty shitty.
There's a concept of a loose outline of a plan, or whatever it is. What would be the Bulls-esque trade? Would be something like Io for McBride or RJ Barrett.
That's giving the Bulls way too much credit.
Man. But yeah, what would be the move or the inflection point that would make you think, oh, okay, there is a plan here? Is it trading Kobe White, or is it not even that, because you're waiting to see, okay, well, what did they trade Kobe White for? And if that's what you're waiting for, you don't have to get into specific players, picks, teams, but is it?
I have an answer.
Draft picks. Okay,
I have an answer for you straight away. So they have like a Zach Collins $18 million expiring contract, right? They also have the Kobe White contract that's expiring. They shouldn't act as
Patrick
if it's
Williams expiring, or does he have another decade left on that deal? Can you let me know?
But if the Bulls suddenly make a trade, like where they take back long-term money for Zach Collins, but they take on draft equity, now there's a sign there of, oh yeah, we're willing to punt on the next few years in order to gather draft picks. The thing is, that trade is never going to come, because that's not the way they think. But that would be a sign. That would be the biggest sign you could get of them being willing to punt a couple of years to try to be better and accumulate assets. It's just not going to be a thing. Like, the coaching staff and the front office have actually outlined, like, oh, we're really looking forward to Zach Collins next year. What?
Well, that's
what?
You could get it. That's just public.
No, but like, again, like, why even specify it, right? It's just.
Well, was it unprompted? Yeah, if they just unsolicitedly brought up Zach Collins, then yeah, that's weird.
Like, what's next? Like, oh, Kevin Huerter, man. Whoa.
There, Berserk Monk in the chat. This would be more Bulls to me. A Kuminga sign and trade for Kobe White. That would be like peak Bull. And I guess Kuminga's young enough.
Rest in peace, floor spacing.
Right, but like to have him, Buzelis, and Esengwe on the same team would be, and like Giddey too. Like, that would be weird.
And now Okoro.
Now, what if you were getting like a pick from Golden State as well? Would that make you feel better about it, or is it, I don't want to get into Jonathan Kuminga for like 20 or 25 million a year?
No. Like, picks help, because here's the thing: if you trade for Kuminga, he's so young. What is he? 22, 23?
Yeah, I think he's 22. Yeah.
Oh, super young still. Like, so that means there's still upside. Like, I don't think that Kuminga is going to be untradeable. So like you can go in there and say, all right, we kind of was it Kobe who was it like he the outgoing player?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You kind of basically say, okay, we're kind of giving the Kobe White contract new life. We're just doing it with Kuminga instead. Maybe we just unleash him for a year and he, I don't know, averages 24 points a game. Some team is going to be completely infatuated with him, and then you flip him for a major profit. The thing is, do I trust the Bulls to even think that way? No, I don't. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be facetious. I genuinely don't trust them to then go on and trade Kuminga for something good.
I don't know what you shouldn't trust them. There's no fans out there that should trust them. If you disagree, like if you actually think that the Bulls are going to start a rebuild or that you like these decisions, that is fine. Like differences of opinion are totally cool. The Bulls have done zero to earn the benefit of the doubt from anybody though. So like I don't know how anyone could sit here and say how you feel is wrong.
Right. I have a question for you because we have to get into it. Josh Giddey. It's such a difficult conversation to have because the fan base is like split. There's a civil war brewing. There is the one camp who's like, he's not going to take you anywhere, that's the camp I'm in. And then there's a camp that basically says, oh, he's a franchise leader. He's a future all-star. Pay him whatever. He's great.
That's a camp?
Oh, big time. Does
anyone attend?
Wow. Yes. Oh, you'd be surprised. And here's the thing. I will concede that I can also be too pessimistic at times. So I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Let's assume the truth is indeed somewhere in the middle. If he becomes your primary offensive initiator, you're basically your heliocentric main offensive hub, where the hell does that take you long term? And now I'm asking you because I want to get the perspective of someone else.
I don't know where it takes you because it would depend on the context of the team. And I would say right now, so let's use the Bulls as they're currently built for next season. It's probably not taking you anywhere super special because is there enough shooting? Like you still have Kobe White, Nikola Vucevic, and Jalen Smith. Like having actual floor spacing at the 5 is a pretty big deal still. Mm-hmm. So there are things that you could do, but like if he's going to be the driving force of your entire offense, like you just need to kind of load up on, okay, 4 shooters are around him, and then we have at least 3 positive defenders around him at all times as well. And I think here's the problem with when it comes to Josh Giddey. And like you can talk about the money and how the cap is going up and you have to look at it in percentages of the cap. I agree with all that stuff. When it's Luka Doncic and you have to build your team a very specific way to cover for his weaknesses, he is so elite at the things he does best. Yep. It's worth it. It's the same thing with Nikola Jokic. It's the same thing with Steph Curry. Josh Giddey's not that player. Like he's a good passer. He's got like when the floater's going down, that's pretty good. His 3-point shot has at least it's improved. Like we can say it's improved. Do you trust it? Especially in the playoffs, we don't know. But he is to have someone to have to plan around someone who is at best like what a top 15 point guard. Like is that? I'm not even trying to be like an a-hole there. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to build your team around that person. Like that's someone who, in theory, for what they are, should be coming off the bench, maybe running second units, or you're trying to figure out a way, how do we fit him into the context of our actual franchise player, where maybe you still have 4 floor spacers on the court, but you're using Josh Giddey more off the ball for some reason, or maybe your best player is a big and more of a play finisher. So like if you were to insert someone different into the Vooch role, then yeah. But if you're viewing Josh Giddey as, okay, well, this guy's going to be the driving force of our entire offense, you're putting limitations on yourself in the sense that you have to build your team in a very specific way. And I think, look, Giannis is another guy. You have to build your team around him in a very specific way. Now, he's more of a battering ram, so it's not as specific, but he's worth it because, like, he's so elite on defense. In addition to, like, he's just improved a bunch on offense. And look, if Josh Giddey turns into, like, the names I dropped are all NBA players right now. Josh Giddey has never played even close to that level, so it's fair to wonder if giving him, let's say, 20% of the salary cap is a good decision in restricted free agency, especially, and this is the other thing, we got to get off the Bulls at some point. You want to prove that you've changed or that you're making smarter decisions, don't negotiate. against yourself. I want
Right.
every player to get every single cent that they can. But last year, who was giving Patrick Williams a contract? There was no offer sheets given out to anybody. There wasn't one coming to Patrick Williams. Unless you think the Nets are coming in with an offer sheet for Josh Giddey, and I would argue that they're not going to, like you don't, and if they do, match it.
Let him.
If you want, yeah, let the market set it. And if there's no market, look, that's just, if you want to say, look, restricted free agency might be borderline in the eyes of some unethical. This was collectively bargained. It's the way it's set up right now. This is
Right.
what the team should be doing, the smart ones anyway. And there's always the element of where you and I are coming from, or everyone else who covers the league. We're so far removed that it's okay. We probably have a lower price point. We're going to squeeze them this hard. Diplomatically, you probably. I'm laughing at Danny Metten just said that. The Nets just drafted, for anyone who's not watching, Danny Metten says the Nets just drafted like 3 Josh Giddeys.
He's not wrong. He's
That's
not
me.
wrong.
You know what? The Yegor Demon comps to Josh Giddey have made me uneasy, and I love because I love Yegor Demon. Look, that's just my point. Is the Bulls need to still prove that they're going to change, and so I think that Josh Giddey's, even if you're not going to make another trade, like let's see you handle the Josh Giddey negotiation properly. And so no, he's not going to sign for $10 million a year. But why is this someone who's getting noticeably more than 18 or
Right.
20 a year based off
Right.
what he does? Like why
But
is he
Patrick
worth
Williams'
more?
contract would be fine.
Right. Like why is he worth more than 15% of the salary cap right
Yeah.
now? Like I
Yeah.
just don't, especially relative to the market. That's where I'm at with him. I think he could still be. I think he was useful for them last year. I just don't think that he's a pole star, that's not an insult.
And that's why I wanted to get your take, because I agree. I do think, and it's the roster construction specifically where I think you paint yourself into a corner if you turn Josh Giddey into, like, if you're trying to shoehorn him into being your best player. You just can't. Like, you're giving up so much flexibility. You're right. We need to get off the Bulls because this is just becoming too depressing.
Let's talk about the other team involved in the Lonzo Ball trade, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So we can get to my question first because I decided to make my question about the Lonzo Ball trade.
Okay.
Is Lonzo Ball, to you, Mort, enough of a, I don't even want to know if maybe it's a rotation upgrade, but enough of a depth preserver, and we know that Sam Merrill is coming back, or do you think that there will be more moves to follow? And there are layers to this because the Cavs are they're deeper into the second apron now because let's say, look, Lonzo and Isaac Okoro were a wash, basically. Lonzo's a little bit cheaper next season, but now you're bringing back Merrill. I think it was 3 for 38. Was that his deal, or was it 4?
Four for 38, I think.
4 for 38. So you're bringing him. You're like $20 million or more, like into the second apron at this point. Do you think that the Lonzo Ball fit? How do you feel about it for the Cavs, especially when viewed through the lens of, okay, Ty Jerome is clearly leaving?
I actually gave them an A over at Yahoo Sports. Now, with the caveat that he plays, right? So that's the thing. He played, 35 games this season. So the availability is still a big, big question. I decided to be optimistic and just kind of look at it through the perspective of what kind of player are they getting. Because he moved surprisingly well this season after coming back. And someone might correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't he playing on like a cadaver's knee? Like, didn't he get like a knee transplant from? I think so, which is like crazy to think about. But he moved very, very well. He's still so intelligent out there, and you can see it in the way that he approaches the game. You can see it on out of bounds plays. Like he's a thinker, and I think the Cavs are going to appreciate someone who come in from the second unit, again, depending on health, who just knows how to set guys up, who isn't really shot hungry. This isn't a dig on Ty Jerome. I thought Ty Jerome was wonderful, but I do think Lonzo has more buttons to push in many ways, where he can scale back, he can scale up, he can do all these sorts of things defensively. He's switchable. He's a great floor presence and playmaker. He's a solid rebounder. He'll make these crazy outlet passes. Like, he's a really, really good. He's got great court vision, actually. So I don't hate it. I actually love it quite a bit, pending he's on the floor. Now, you're asking me if they were going to make additional moves. With the tax bill there and like over the second apron, I think they're probably just going to make Craig Porter Jr. their first string point guard and call that a day?
Which might be fine. And also, you could just make Lonzo your third string point guard and just play like a lot of full court stuff, because not last year in Chicago, but like he's someone who will up your transition rate. And for the Cleveland Cavaliers specifically, I know they did play faster last year when you're looking at some of their base lineups, but they still finished, like when you're looking in transition, they were in the, I think the 15th percentile of transition frequency overall. There, the lineup with Strus and then the 4 stars, that got out in transition like a pretty good amount, but just some of their core lineups after did not. Lonzo can come in and if he's on the floor and he's healthy, he will continue to make sure that you do that. And so you get your floor spacing, doesn't need to be on the ball. He's big enough to play with Garland or Mitchell. I think so that gives you, you're like kind of, it feels like you have the same amount of guards as last year. And like, that's almost kind of fine. Like you didn't need more than that if you're assuming, because look, at the end of the day, if Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland aren't healthy, like you're not going to be close to the peak version of yourself. Anyway, I love this trade for them because I was not an Isaac Okoro guy. Like defensively, sure. Now when you look at this team, it feels like there are fewer bodies that could defend wings. It's really just, Max Strus is held up sometimes, but you have DeAndre Hunter, who kind of made this trade possible a little bit, like to where you felt like you could give up Isaac Okoro. And then, of course, if Dean Wade is healthy. So it's weird. A lot of their role players, it's not so much with the stars, even though Darius Garland has dealt with all these, feels like freak injuries at this point. That dude, we need to get the stats on how many times he's hit in the face per 36 minutes. It's got to lead the league, or at least come close to it. But I love the Lonzo fit offensively because I just think he can give them a change of cadence option. Yep. And, I think Ty Jerome would have been better. Is better, when you want to slow things down in the half court, run a more traditional offense. But you have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and now Evan Mobley, by the way. Like if you need to slow things down and run some more methodical sets, those are the guys you go to. And so I like Lonzo is going to be the better defender, and I think because of the threat level he poses away from the ball, and maybe just if he grabs a rebound or is able to get, throw a hit-ahead pass, or he's catching a hit-ahead pass, I think that'll help you more in the playoffs, because Ty Jerome went through some really rough moments in the playoffs this year. That's not to say that he himself will not continue to get better, but to just have this option on this team to where I honestly think that maybe you haven't improved your defense because you've lost Isaac Okoro, but you now have exchanged, let's say, I don't want to call Isaac Okoro a one-way player because he did hit his threes last year, but Lonzo Ball is decidedly a two-way player. And so just have more of those guys on the roster where Ty Jerome and Isaac Okoro were not decidedly two-way players. And so to just bring this guy in, and look, because you're Cleveland and you're so deep and you have a Craig Porter Jr., you have Sam Merrill, you can also just go with more jumbo lineups if you really want to, where Garland and Mitchell are the point, and maybe you play Strus and Hunter with Mobley and Allen. You just have the depth to say, Lonzo could play 15 minutes a game. That's fine with us. I love this trade for them. And it's not even to say this comes at the expense of the Bulls, even though I don't necessarily love it for them. As we said, we understand it for them. I love this trade for Cleveland. And yes, it comes with the caveat of his health, but you have to assume that they have information on his health. And he was available at points for him to even take the floor last season was really cool. And so I think the workload he would have to shoulder in Cleveland, at least offensively, is even smaller probably than it ever would have been in Chicago. And they just have the flexibility to manage his workload better than a lot of other maybe contenders would. But you don't trade for Lonzo Ball unless you're prepared to say, hey, he might miss some time. We're not going to play him over 20 minutes per game ever. But he racked up 777 minutes last year in 35 appearances. I'm pretty optimistic. If he's healthy, I would say this is an A++ trade for Cleveland.
And there's another component to this. Jalen Tyson. I don't think he was a bet. Jalen Tyson.
I'm just kidding.
What?
It's just Cavs
you said it so sincerely, though.
They were all about last year when he was drafted, this is a supercharged Karis LeVert, and I just love, because I do the same thing with rookies I fall in love with, where it's just we're ready to just throw around these haphazard. Karis LeVert's been an NBA player for a decade, and we're just this dude's gonna be so much better than him.
I love how you said that. So you sold it. You really. I was like,
look,
you're kidding me.
You don't know this, but if you go back to my elementary school yearbook, they ask questions, and then under your photo, it says, what do you want to do for a living? I had actor/professional basketball player.
Oh, okay,
so,
great. All right, there we go. But I feel pretty confident in just stepping his minutes up a little bit in replacement of Okoro. Like that relationship had like run its course, and that's not. I'm not low on Okoro. I actually think he was underutilized. I think they could have used him more, but the writing was on the wall. So for them to pivot off of that contract, get something useful in return, and now that spot opens up for a guy who was selected in the first round last year, that's a win. I didn't even include that in my Yahoo piece about this trade. I should have because I didn't think of it.
All right, well,
at the
let's
time.
end the podcast now so you can go add it in.
Right?
Shout out Frank Ntilikina. Apologies.
Immediately. But yeah, I'm like you. I'm just not particularly worried about their depth at all.
They've preserved it as far as, like, if you lose Ty Jerome, like, you're probably just as deep as you were last year, provided that Lonzo Ball is healthy. And I think sort of the question here is, they've now decidedly said that they're going to go into the tax, as my dogs go off in the background.
Yep.
But not the tax, the second apron. But, like, is that going to hold? And it's, you kind of look at Max Strus and DeAndre Hunter as the guys that, if they're going to do something, like, that's how you would save money. But at this point, just, like, with the lack of cap flexibility, like, floating around out there, like, none of those guys just fit into the mid-level exception. So unless you're planning on just dumping Lonzo Ball off and you're still in the second apron at the end of the day, I like what this signals to me, is that the Cavs are going to go into the second apron for at least a year. And if you're going to pick a year, I actually think that the East is going to be more competitive than people think with the moves that Atlanta has made and could still make. Desmond Bane in Orlando. So, yeah, you're subbing out Boston and Indy, but maybe there's two other teams. And look, Philly might be healthier. We make jokes all the time, but, like, there is at least a small chance that they're healthier or make some type of other move. The Pistons could get better and add stuff too, and we're about to talk about them in a minute. So I like the Cavs, though, picking next season as, all right, Boston's down, like, relative to what Boston's supposed to be. Ditto for Indiana. Like, yeah, like, this, if we're going to go, like, this is the year to go into the second apron for. Now, if they turn around and trade, like, Darius Garland and shave off a bunch of money, I will stand corrected. That's the other thing I did see, by the way. I think that there's this, especially reflexively, there is this idea or this urge to make every move, even when it doesn't involve these major stars, about something bigger. And I kind of saw, oh, they're getting Lonzo. Is that because they're going to trade Darius Garland? I did not, like, that is not anything that, like, anyone who's watched Lonzo over the past last season and then before he was hurt, like, understands that he is not, like, you don't put him in the Darius Garland role. You are a worse team if you put him in the Darius Garland role.
Yeah. That's wild, though. 35 games, like 70 games played total over the past 4 seasons.
Now, maybe I'm following LeVar's burner on social media and I didn't realize. Could that have been?
Go. Yeah.
I mean, he's probably PO'd. He wants LaMelo on the Clippers. He probably wants both of his kids on the Clippers. But I think, back to my point there of, I do think Lonzo is enough of a rotation upgrade or at least preserver. I don't know if more moves will follow. I think this is a team, like, if you're a wing, this might be a team that you'd be interested in taking a pit, like, oh, I'll sign for the minimum, because they do kind of have, like, minutes available if they wanted. But, like, they're kind of, like, this team, as currently constructed, they can absolutely just win the title. And they should probably be the favorites to come out of the East as of right now next season.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's all because of Lonzo, who's going to replace Darius Garland, the heir apparent there, and that's how much better they are. But
and so who are they getting for Garland, just to take this fantasy?
Patrick Williams, maybe? Like, what do you... I love this team. I loved them last year. Obviously, the way the season ended was a disappointment, but I think it took...
Right.
You can look at this and say, because we love the Lonzo move, but it does take, just like it took a level of gall to go out and get DeAndre Hunter when you're kind of rolling during the regular season, I think it takes guts to say, yes, I know owners were the ones that pushed for the second apron. I'm not going to, pat Dan Gilbert on the back, although to his credit, he's by and large been willing to pay when it comes to rosters, maybe not so much with behind-the-scenes personnel in the front office. But, like, at a time when teams are running from the second apron, they're recognizing that, hey, it probably feels like teams are going to be willing to stay in it for a year. You just kind of have to pick the year. And they've decided that next year is the year. That, again, that's my read on the situation right now, and I commend it.
Yeah, it's not the wrong read.
No, well, I don't think it's... But, like, again, we say this, and then we turn around. I was talking about, it's like, I think the Blazers should extend Anthony Simons. Like, they really need his shooting, and then they turn around and they trade Drew Holiday. So...
Well, we
anything
can't keep hedging our bets, Dan. Like, the NBA is going to NBA. We just have to get our takes off.
All right, well, then let me fire off some stuff here. I think Craig Porter Jr. is going to be who's like Steve Nash on steroids without the jump shot. What type of player is that? There we go.
Nice.
That's the take we're going to fire off. You have anything left on them? I think it's clear they're going to stay the course. I don't even know what – were you actually concerned by, like, the murmurings that, like, would they look at moving Allen and Garland seem to be the names that pop up the most?
No. Well, nervous – no, not really.
I'm curious, I guess. Like, I don't know why that would make you nervous.
No, I was pretty dismissive of those because I just everything pointed towards them actually coming back with mostly the same core. Because why wouldn't you? You know, Dame Achilles injury, Tyrese Halliburton unfortunately Achilles injury, Jason Tatum. Oh wait, Jason Tatum with the Achilles injury as well.
I think we should just assume anyone who's injured has an Achilles issue until told otherwise.
Right? Where's number 0 and are in the Eastern Conference? Like, get scared, Kobe White. But no, knock on wood, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, don't put
never
that in
want
the
to do
universe.
That. No, I don't.
Don't worry, they're using AI to fix it to get to the bottom of it. And I think we're going to find that science and artificial intelligence miraculously align with the NBA's business interests.
Right.
That's my prediction. I know it's shocking and out there, but
you know, given those injuries, I just never took it seriously because obviously Cavs brass are going to sit there and look at the market and look at the competitive field. They're going to go, where do we rank ourselves right now? Probably fairly highly. Like, we can get through a series against this team, the Pacers, without Halliburton. We can get through a series against Milwaukee because it's Giannis and 50 feet of crap. We can get through. Sorry, I mean, let's just be real about it. We can maybe even get through Boston.
I would like to have a conversation about Ryan Rollins' screen navigation.
Ryan Rollins, you know what? That is fair. I like Ryan Rollins too. So they have Giannis, Ryan Rollins. That's a tough name for me to say. And then 46 feet of crap.
Anything else on the Cavs? We're in agreement. I mean, what would be the team if you had to pick other than the Cavs to be favored to win the East next season? Again, relative to the Achilles landscape, let's call it.
God. I have them so far ahead. So, like the Knicks, maybe?
If they hire Jenny Busick as their head coach, I'll pick them to win the Eastern Conference. That's where I'm at with them. But it's probably the Knicks or maybe Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando might. Yeah.
I still, you want to see what that offense still turns into because they're still kind of punting on the whole like floor general aspect. But yeah, I think it's Cleveland, Orlando, and New York feel like the three. And like, what do you make of Philly? Yeah, if you tell me that Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey play in 70 games together, we can have a conversation. But I can almost guarantee that's not happening. Let's talk Detroit Pistons. Mort, what's your question? We have no moves to report for the Pistons, right? Let's check our phones. No, we're good. Mort,
not at this point.
What's your question for the Pistons?
So, what should they do at center? So Jalen Duren, love the guy. Truly, truly, I do. He's young. He's still developing. He's fairly raw still. And it feels as though they're ready to turn on the accelerator a little bit. So I guess the question is more than just the center part, but I think he's like the epicenter of it all. Do you stay the course here and just trust the process and go into that? Or do you actually try to pivot off of someone like Jalen Duren and go for someone more established to kind of push in your chips a little bit?
So I guess what's tough about that is you just kind of saw, I understand Jalen Duren's better. How much more, if you were to trade Jalen Duren right now, just Jalen Duren, it's not part of a bigger package, how much more are you getting for him than the Hornets got for Mark Williams, which was number 29 and then a distant first-round pick that's, it's shaping up to be in the 20s.
Well, right, and see, it wouldn't be a picks-oriented package. It would have to be some type of accelerator, right, in terms of someone who's older, a little bit more experienced. But again, it makes me sound like I'm down on Jalen Duren, which I'm not. It's just a question of where are the Pistons in their thinking. Like, that's what I want to know. Or because if they're cool just kind of returning with the same young core, Cade, Duran, hopefully more of 30 games out of Jaden Ivey. You know what? I run with that. I'm okay with that. I think that takes some balls, and I would appreciate that. I would applaud that because that means they trust their product. That means they expect that product to grow collectively. So I'm a fan of that. I kind of hope that, not kind of, I actually hope that's what happens. But I'm asking the question because you forced me to ask a question.
Well, it's a valid question because he is extension eligible, and their center position is weird because it's, them not. This is kind of not talked about enough, but Isaiah Stewart played 19 minutes during that first round series because he was banged up. And do you trust him to remain healthy? How many minutes can he log? And he's not necessarily providing a floor spacing element from the 5. Would you prefer?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I mean, the volume was so. I've had this discussion with Pistons fans in our Discord, and they've rightfully pointed out like the volume just wasn't high enough to be like this huge difference maker. But like, are you bringing back Paul Reed? So they do have, and we know they were interested in Naz Reid. I think it was Jake Fisher and Mark Stein had it over at the Stein line that they were planning to be in on him. So, I mean, and they have flexibility, and they certainly have assets to do a sign and trade if they want. They could get cap space if they want. The center's fascinating, but for Jalen Duren specifically, if you're going to keep him, which I think is the most likely outcome, I guess if you're trying to make and that'll step on the toes of my question, like a really big trade, he's someone that you would consider including. What would you be willing to pay him in an extension before you say, no, we'll take it to restricted free agency?
Oh, that's a good question, Dan. I hadn't thought about like the specific extension number for Jalen Duren yet. Mostly because I kind of probably question they find common ground.
Yeah, honest. Because I think he's going to look at the Naz Reid deal, the Nicholas Claxton deal, maybe even the Jakob Poeltl contract. Like just as, okay, these centers are making a minimum of $20 million, but Claxton and Naz Reid, those are, and like Claxton's probably more. They're all different players. These, they're not similar guys at all. But like Claxton, in terms of, all right, he's not a floor spacer. But like Jalen Duren, really good passer. Claxton switches. Like they do things that are not like anomalous or super valuable at the position. I think
480.
I think that's the number where. I think that's the
number
where I'd be like, okay, I'd feel pretty good about that because what does that end up being like as a percentage of the salary cap? Is that even 15? Like, so that's just like, I think that's super fine. So, like that's where I'd end up. So, I don't. But anything
less
more
than
than
15. Like this season, Jared Allen was at 20 straight, and that was 12.9% of the cap. And the cap is only going to go up, so it's going to be like 12% of the cap next year.
So I put that, and like for a starting center, that's actually probably really good. So I think 4 and 100, or if you wanted to go 5 and 125, because he is just so young.
I wouldn't hate it.
Right. So that's actually 16% of the set. Oh, 25 million is 16%. So 20 million would be, then you absolutely do that. I think 25 would be, I might think about it because 20 is 13%. But beyond that, like if it's 25, I might just take it to restricted free agency anyway, because I'm sitting here saying who's giving him that offer. And I just think that he's an imperfect center and that you're not. I think one of the worst things you can do is overreact to that season where it feels like you popped and are onto something. You have to take more of a measured approach to it. And that's not to say that Jalen Duren can't be a part of the grander plan, but like, let's see him be as good defensively, like his highest highs. Like, let's see him package those together for even longer stretches this year.
Right.
Does he improve? Do the Pistons overall improve? So I think, honestly, unless he comes in and is kind of looking at the center market, and do I think that I'm going to get more than Naz Reid or Claxton is willing to go for 80? I don't know that if I'm the Pistons, I think I'm taking it to RFA.
It's crazy to think that he is already extension eligible and he's 21. He's going to sign if he gets an extension offer and signs it, he'll sign it at age 21. Jesus.
Which is why you're super comfortable going 5 years on an extension too.
Like easily.
This might be one of the more fascinating rookie classes. Like when you're looking at like their extensions, like is Mark Williams going to get? There's just a lot of good players, but it's do you sign them to it? There's not a lot of no-brainer. Like there's not a bunch of J Dubs and Chet Holmgrens floating around out there. My question though for this team, Mort, how aggressive will they and should they be looking to make upgrades, especially via trade, because I say especially via trade because I think that they're going to, and operating over the cap is super easy. Just carry the holds for Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder. You can probably keep Malik Beasley using the mid-level. And so after that, it's all right. Maybe you could use they should have the biannual available to them, but a trade would be the primary vehicle, it looks like, through which they would make the most improvement. So the question to me is twofold. How aggressive do you think they should be? And if they were to make a trade, like what is the archetype of player that they should be targeting?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't hate a more offensively minded wing who can also go up and play the 4. But
I seem to remember someone saying that you hated this as a Lowry Markkanen team when I brought it up the other day.
Did I say I hated that?
You did not like it, and it was yesterday, in fact, sir, when we were talking about the Northwest Division.
I thought I said that was one of the teams where I could see it.
I thought you said you didn't like it. You said, or maybe you said you wouldn't do it if it cost you Jaden Ivey.
Now you're actually making me like rethink everything there. But like, okay, I think it's the salary that bothered me. Also, I don't like Laurie as a 3-man. I said that for sure. Like this guy would have to be primarily 3-man driven, I think. And again, Oscar Thompson, I think that would be also tough because he deserves minutes, right? So I wouldn't like going in and just kind of trading for someone in that spot. But I do think they need one more piece, and especially someone who can score the ball, right? Now, who is that player? There's no one really on the market that's available. Like, honestly,
will say,
yeah.
I bet you could guess where I'm going. I would totally consider a LaMelo
Randall?
Ball trade if it's out there. Julius Randle? No, thank you.
You know, what were you saying, LaMelo Ball?
Yeah, him and Exicade? That totally works.
As a 3-4, okay. I specifically...
Oh, no, I'm just talking. You wanted a scorer. I mean,
yeah.
You know what would be interesting? He's not going to give you as much on-ball stuff, but like, this could be a Cam Johnson team. Would be a really good Cam Johnson team.
That's a good name. I was actually toying around with the idea of Trey Murphy, but then I remembered we've already shipped him to OKC. But like Cam Johnson is a good one.
He also feels gettable, whereas Trey Murphy does not feel gettable at this moment.
But that's the type of player, right? Like he's a big wing, can play the 4. That's the archetype.
If this guy's available, and I think this leads into the discussion of like this would be ultra aggressive.
Okay.
Like if Jaylen Brown's available, do you like him on this team or no? And I think that's with the caveat of knowing, okay, Asar Thompson is clearly going out in this deal. At least one of him and Ron Holland, I would assume.
I'm so the wrong person to ask that because I'm not a Jaylen Brown guy.
I just think it's too soon to make a trade like that too. Like the cost it would take to get Jaylen Brown, they have all their future picks, but like you're probably looking at, I would say, a minimum of 2 from Duren, Jaden Ivey, Thompson, and Holland, plus your entire draft stash.
And that's too rich. That's just too rich for me.
I was just curious.
And yeah, no, it's a fair question. But I like if this had been Jaylen Brown from 2 years ago, I probably would have.
Do you know what team I feel like they should act like? And then maybe that would give us an idea of like what players might fall into that bucket. Do you remember when the Pacers traded for Pascal Siakam? I know a lot of people didn't like it, and it was 3 first-round picks, but you look at, they now own one of those first-round picks again. But that first-round pick didn't have a ton of value. Like the 3 first they gave up, like look at what they've turned into. That's the type of, like, and they don't have extra first, so it's a little bit weird, but like if it's Jaden Ivey and 2 firsts or Duren and 2 firsts, and they're protected, like that's the type of trade that I think could make. Now, I'm not giving up 2 firsts and Jaden Ivey or Jalen for Cam Johnson. That's not what I'm saying. But like to be opportunistic about someone who's either a star or close to it, maybe they're entering free agency and they're rolling the dice and you don't think there's going to be a huge market. Or maybe it's marketing would be a good example where if the Jazz are willing to move him, we both agree there's no rush to move him. But if they are willing to move him, his contract doesn't look so hot in this moment. Maybe it gets better. Could you come in and get like opportunistically get him for a lower value than you would have before he signed this deal?
I think I have like an oddball name for you.
Please say it's Jalen Johnson.
Brandon Ingram.
There's a lot of talk about like him with the Pistons beforehand.
I missed that entirely. Apologies.
Before he was traded to Toronto, of course. I just don't like it. I want
Too ball
someone
dominant?
who's I want someone who can alleviate Cade's workload rather than cannibalize it, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense. Yes. Do you think that Cade will allow that? It seems like he's a guy who's like very much in control.
Well, all right, so let's say he is in control, but like there were points where Zion was in control in New Orleans, and it wasn't like no great shakes the answer of having Brandon Ingram away from the ball there.
Right, but he was in and out of the lineup so much. I think that also screwed with the head of Ingram a little bit. I can't keep like adjusting to this.
If you told me that they could get some floor spacing at the 5 and it's Ingram and Cade surrounded by 3 shooters, or maybe 2 shooters plus a SAR or something, I wouldn't hate that as much. But like, I'm not giving up a first-round pick for him. Like, it's salary, and that's what I'm saying.
Oh, no, I didn't specify trade either. I wouldn't give up the fam. Yeah, no. I wouldn't either.
They're at a point in just sort of their cap sheet life cycle where you could do something like have Brandon Ingram for 3 years and $40 million a pop basically isn't the end of the world. That wouldn't be my favorite one. But, like, that would be an example of what the Raptors just did, is they got someone who's high impact at the nadir of his value. That would be the type of opportunity that I think this team should be in the market for, because they're still preserving their asset base moving forward.
Andrew Wiggins.
Ooh. That'd be interesting. That'd be really, really interesting, because they don't have a lot of, or like, do they have any? Cade. There you go. But like a lot of just two-way perimeter players. They just don't have, like, Asar is just, he's two-way because his offensive decision-making, even with Ron Holland, but someone who's also like can make threes or like make jump shots would be nice. I really like that. If the Heat are
and he's not going to cost you a whole ton, I imagine.
No, because if you're the Heat, now they did just re-sign Davion Mitchell, so maybe there's like a disconnect there. But if you're the Heat and want cap space next year, Andrew Wiggins is a player option. Maybe he declines it and you get cap space. Like Tobias Harris comes off the books. Like, that's someone who's coming off the books. Would you do Jaden Ivey and maybe there's other framework there, but Jaden Ivey and Tobias Harris for Andrew Wiggins, or is that too much? No,
what this Jaden Ivey nonsense? No, he stays.
Then what are you giving up?
You're probably relinquishing a pick here. Yeah.
If it's protected, I could probably be talked into it.
Yeah.
I'd probably prefer someone with a little bit more on-ball juice, like off of Cade, but if you're keeping Jaden Ivey, and you can have, we saw them do more stuff with Asar Thompson in that role last year too, so I don't hate that at all.
I mean, the idea is to turn Wiggins into a third option instead of a secondary option. Like it would have to be Cade, Ivey, I guess Thompson at the 3, Wiggins at the 4 as a small ball 4. And
do you think Ivey has a chance of getting an extension? He's extension eligible too. I think that one would probably shock me more than Duren if he got an extension.
Because it's tough, right? It's because he's really been a prisoner of the moment in many ways, because then he got screwed over by Monty Williams, which was just the oddest thing, like the in and out of the lineup, like herky jerky, and then this year he got injured, missed 52 games. Like it's been a rocky start to his career. And that's why I'm also a little bit annoyed when I see people like so aggressively put him in, not you necessarily, although right now, absolutely, when you aggressively put him into trades, because context is necessary here. I think there's a good ass player in there. I think he needs a shot. I think he needs some stability, and he also needs to be healthy. Like I hated for him that he missed 52 games this year. I hated that for him, because he was finally getting into a role where he was like beginning to feel more comfortable, and boom, injury. That sucks, man. Like, I want to see him a full year, no Monty Williams, no shenanigans, healthy, because I think there's a guy in there who could reach a significantly higher level than where he's at right now.
So if you're them, and you already mentioned like where you want the position to come from, but you're not necessarily targeting someone to be the secondary scorer type because you want to see more of Jaden Ivey before you make a declaration on him. I think that's fair, maybe a little risky, just like given how long he's been in the league now, and if you're looking to actually make a bump off of last season. But I think that's perfectly fair. I honestly don't know where I land on Jaden Ivey. I think he was noticeably better last year. I honestly still don't think that he's the long-term answer next to Cade, especially if it's going to be a guard. I think I want someone who's going to do more of the, like, he's had some really good playmaking moments. I'd like to see him string together more of just like the methodical offensive table setting, and see if he can do that next year, which again, if the Pistons are going to continue to prop up a better spacing environment, maybe he can do.
Side note, for teams that are, a little bit without an identity, if the league at large looks at Jaden Ivey like you do, where it's like there's a fair level of skepticism, that's a guy you kind of go get if you can get him for cheap, right? If you're
Right.
if you're a little rudderless.
Yeah, their timeline horizon though is such that I don't think that they would just give him up for, like, if you were to trade him as part of a bigger package, I think they view him as having real value, which again,
Right,
is fair. So it'd be different if like there was a sense that the Pistons are completely out on him, and we just haven't gotten that sense. I think that's probably more so born from
Me
a lack
neither.
of information. But
Right. It was
what I
just a
will say-
theoretical.
right, well, the theoretical, to your point though, is just remember, like, even with Asar Thompson, but especially Duren and Ivy, because they're extension eligible, this front office didn't pick those guys. And so, like, that's probably something that could be discussed more when you're looking at, will they get an extension? Could they be involved in trade packages? And it's probably fallen by the wayside just because the Pistons were good last year,
Yeah.
which is, like, great for them. What do you think about, I'm, like, kind of latching onto the idea of, like, big man upgrades. What if they were the Jabari Smith Jr. team?
Oh, that'd be interesting. Like, not as a replacement for Duren, but like as an addition.
Play them
to
together, or
Yeah.
and then stagger them. Like, give Jabari a run at the 5 for sure, but he doesn't need to play at the 5 exclusively.
No, but he can play a lot of 4. I don't hate that. I would like slightly more ball handling from my 4. That's why Wiggins, I think, like fits in so
What
well.
about another Rocket who is available per Kelly Iko and Cam Whitmore?
Yeah, like he's more of a 2-3. But
2-3.
you know what? Are we saying that Thompson can't play the 4? Because I'm not saying that. I think he can. Like
I'm
he
not
feels.
saying he can't either. I mean, you're not. Well, because you have Thompson, though, and if you believe in Ivy's passing, like, you have enough second, because Cam Whitmore's not going to give you any tertiary passing there. That's just not
No,
happening.
he's a bucket getter.
If there was like we actually did made up awards this year. We had subscribers submit the categories they want to hear, and we statistically did like an all black hole award, and Cam Whitmore, I think, was like on first team or something. So when you were looking at his pass rate, but anyway,
I get it, but it's almost unfair to some extent because he's only played like 98 games.
right.
And he's played so few minutes total.
I'm just going to keep naming Rockets. Go out and
Right.
get Reed Shepherd. Put him next to Cade Cunningham and watch it all sit.
I mean,
and
look,
come
the
together.
guy to go for if you're like if you're trying to shop in Houston, it's Tari Eason.
They're not. No, I don't think. Honestly,
They're
I think
not
with Kevin
interested. I'm
Durant
saying
there-
that's the guy. That's the guy for the Pistons. Like I would love that addition there.
you keep naming players that I feel like are so implausibly available. Ooh, this
That's
is a good
fair.
one from Danny Menton. Now, Ty Jerome. If you don't have your mid level, it's probably tough to get him. He makes some pretty good sense here. As sort of, you don't have to get rid of Ivy. Then you can play 2 ball handlers at once all the time. Basically, I don't hate that.
I don't
one.
hate that. I like that one. That's not bad. So if it comes down to it, what would you spend the non-tax MLE on? Ty Jerome or keeping Malik Beasley?
I think Malik Beasley's just 3-point volume and off-ball motion, and especially because Ty Jerome's not going to be like this monster defensive upgrade. And I actually think Beasley's been mostly fine relative to Malik Beasley there the past
Same.
2 years. So I think it's you spend it on keeping Beasley, and you kind of
same.
hope like. And look, their cap situation is such that if you trade, let's say they just trade Simone Fontecchio just in a vacuum, he's making. Is he at 7.5 next year or just 7?
8.3.
He's at 8.3. All right, basically even better. Like you can trade for a player who's making more than $16 million just by moving Fontecchio.
Right.
Then, so like that's something that like that's a luxury. Like being so far beneath the first apron is a real big luxury. And so I don't know. Again, you'd have to throw out names. Okay, well then what's the trade? I'm not, but like the fact that you could trade Simone Fontecchio in a smaller salary and get a player making like $20+ million is a pretty big deal.
What player can you get who might be overvalued on his current deal if you combine Tobias Harris and Fontecchio, for example? Like not a big fish, but a big contract where you're willing to swallow years.
Karl Anthony Towns?
I mean,
I
look,
was
the
being-
scoring. I know
I'm
you
being-
were, but like the scoring, I wouldn't hate the scoring. The defense, though, would be him and Duren. I wouldn't trust it. I know you were
That
making a joke, but that's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean I can't imagine like if the Knicks are trading maybe it's a third team's involved, but if the Knicks are trading
Yeah,
Karl-Anthony
no.
Towns, I imagine they want like an immediately high return.
But is there like a large contract where you can basically just swap Harrison Fontecchio for that player without it including draft picks, for example?
Well, I was even wondering like, could you do something where it's Fontecchio and then let's look at another smaller salary, or actually you could probably just do Fontecchio because you could futz with his like guaranteed money. Like, what about Fontecchio just straight up for Duncan Robinson?
And are we still keeping Beasley, or are we then going for Ty
Yeah,
Jerome?
you're like leaning kind of into shooting because Duncan Robinson, you could use him at the 2, the 3. You get away with him at the 4, as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, if you really need to, especially with some of the defensive pieces they could insulate him
Yeah.
with.
I mean, look,
Like Cade Cunningham being like 9 feet tall is sort of
Right.
just this hack that allows you to try out all these different sorts of lineups.
Yeah. I mean, if you have Beasley and Duncan Robinson out there, like you're optimizing the everlasting shit out of the floor.
And I mean, Ivy, if he's on the floor in
Yeah.
those minutes, like the spacing for him, because
Same.
then Cade, Robinson, Beasley, I mean, like then that lineup might be pretty small with Dern in the middle, but that's sort of the, okay, we think we got better just because Simone Fontecchio didn't have the best season, but we didn't like commit any, or maybe is there a mega deal out there where it's Wiggins and Robinson and you're giving up Harris and Fontecchio and then what to make it happen? That would be another, because look, Robinson is basically, he has that ETO, but the salary is only partially guaranteed. So like you could guarantee whatever chunk you need to make the money work in a trade that way.
I'm trying to think of fours, and there was a name I was coming up with, and then I realized he was in Detroit recently, and so it doesn't really
Jeremy
make sense.
Grant?
Yeah, that was the guy.
As a stopgap, what about Harrison Barnes?
Oh, now that's a good one. He knows his role. He won't overplay it. He's a bit of a ball handler, but not to an extent where it overtakes anything. And it's like he's playing Maury ball to the full extent. It's like corner threes, shots at the rim, not a lot of mid-range stuff. Brilliant floor spacer, really a thinker out there. That's a good one. And he's at what, like 19 million?
Yeah, he's around there. What about this one? He's at 33 million, reuniting with Chris Middleton for a year.
I always love thinkers. So I'm on board. What's the deal? Is that Tobias
That
Harris?
could be Tobias for Chris Middleton straight up. I mean, you could you could get there. Well, I don't really want to give up Isaiah Stewart if I'm Detroit. So I mean, like Tobias Harris is probably the salary anchor there.
Right.
Now that gets interesting because as a catch and shoot guy and defensively right now, Harris is probably better. But if you're looking for someone who could create more off the dribble, especially in a playoff setting, I'd probably still trust a healthy Chris Middleton. Now, healthy is put in, bold caps lock italics there.
Right. I actually suspect that Washington wouldn't be that interested because it seems as though they have sort of identified Middleton as like the mentor for a lot of these young guys.
What's interesting though is I don't think Chris Middleton views himself that way.
Are we sure of that after all those injuries though?
I mean,
and like whenever he speaks, right, smart things comes out of his mouth every single time. He just seems like a very, very, very intelligent person. I think an organization like the Wizards that are going through a youth movement will greatly appreciate a voice like that in the locker room.
I'll say it right now, even though he's not technically available. The Detroit should be considered a Giannis Antetokounmpo dark horse if he becomes available. Him and Cade would absolutely just destroy worlds. Another name that I kind of like been kicking around the idea, and I don't necessarily like know off rip how it works because he's a free agent, he's a restricted free agent. But if you missed on Nas Reed, Santi Aldama as a 4-5, he's not really a 3-4, but he could make sense here.
Yep. I mean, I would love to see Aldama in a place where he gets more minutes.
Or even look, another Grizzly just buried. Maybe not because of injuries, and Marvin Bagley's a free agent as well. So I was gonna. He'd be fun anywhere, but like Jay Huff, like if you're just looking for the floor spacing element at the 5.
Oh, okay, all right. That's really we went from Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram.
First of all, we didn't
Andrew
go
Wiggins. Now we're down at like Jay Huff. That's where we are. Okay, great.
Though it's all just different levels of moves. John Jones says Pistons top 3 in the East next year. We didn't mention him in that convo, but I think there's like if you told me they were a 3rd seed in the
Oh
East,
yeah,
that
I would
wouldn't
be
shock me.
shocked. That's a good shout.
I would ask you though if they were. I'd probably ask, okay, like what's the trade they made over the offseason that helped get them there? Because I don't know that it would be this core.
It
but
was
I think,
it was the trade of not believing to believing in Jaden Ivey. That was the trade.
I think if they were going to make a big swing, there'd be a ton of different directions they could go. But I think you and I have identified, like, if you're just looking to make these upgrades without really knifing into your core, a combo forward or maybe a combo big would just be the way to go. That doesn't mess with, if anything, it augments the floor spacing balance you carved out last year.
One last name before we move on, and I promise you, I'm not trying.
Luka?
I'm not trying to like go back to the Bulls well intentionally here, but but stay with me on this. We also agree that the Bulls aren't really a great development situation for a lot of players. Could there be a level of interest in, hey, could we actually be the team that gets something out of a Patrick Williams?
I mean, I don't think you could do that as Detroit. That's like too big of a risk. And then he still
it is.
That deal goes on
risk.
forever.
Yeah.
Now, if the Bulls are giving you one of their first round picks, let's have a conversation.
Right. And I get that. It's just at least the contract is flat. I mean, I get it, but like, do you think there's a team out there that might might be interested in a flyer? Like the thing, what I like him about Pat here, though, specifically for Detroit, is he's not going to take up a lot of like the ball handling. Like the usage rate isn't going to be high at all. The defense is something that I think has become a little bit underrated, to be honest with you. And there is a level of 3-point shot making. It wasn't on display this season, but the years before then, he was a pretty reliable 3-point shooter.
On how much volume?
Not a lot of volume, but at least the percentages were consistent until they broke off this year. But like, I still think there's something there that other teams, some specific other team perhaps, can extract from him that the Bulls just couldn't.
I don't think, unless Detroit's being compensated for it, I can't, like, this can't, like, Tobias Harris for Patrick. Yeah, I couldn't touch that if I were them.
That's totally fair. What do we say on this podcast, Dan?
We're just asking questions. That's a good point. Just asking questions. I'm trying to think of, like, what would be the team that could talk themselves into that, and I can't come up with one, to be honest with you.
Joe Dumars. Call Joe.
Or maybe the Nuggets, like Josh Kroenke might be something like Michael Porter Jr. for Patrick Williams and a first-round pick. Or Patrick Williams what about Patrick Williams and Kobe White for Michael Porter Jr.? I'm not doing that if I'm the Nuggets because Kobe White's about to get paid, and I don't know that I want Patrick Williams on the roster. But
you're not doing that if you're the Nuggets.
I don't know. But like, if Patrick Williams can't figure it out alongside Nikola Jokic, then there's real problems.
Well, at least they get Kobe White. That'd be a good fun place. We went into Bulls territory. I was asking specifically about Patrick Williams for the Pistons, though.
I think we kind of hit it where it's like, you know, if it was a bigger swing on a younger player like a Jabari Smith, or it's, you know, you mentioned Cam Johnson, maybe if Sam Hauser is actually available, it feels like, or, you know, the Harrison Barnes type of stopgap.
I think you mentioned Cam Johnson, which was a good shout, by the way. Yes.
All right. Well, let me just dislocate my shoulder, patting myself
exactly.
on the back.
Yeah.
There
I know what you were setting yourself up to. It's fine. Yep.
I don't know that there's like a big name where I'd be like, all right, go get this player.
Right.
Oh, wow. John Jones. Troy Reaver wanted Patrick, but he was taken before they had their pick. And he should thank the Chicago Bulls. Although I troll Patrick Williams now, but I'm more so trolling the Bulls. Yes. I had Patrick Williams as number 4 on my big board that year, I believe. He was at least in my top 5. So I missed on him too. I make fun of the Bulls, but before we move on to another team, we got a couple questions, general NBA questions. Let's catch up on those. Regulator, are you surprised on Sam Merrill's contract? Will Trey Mann get a similar deal? 4 for 38. I'm not surprised. Just as someone, a motion shooter, pop-a-shot champion.
Yeah, that's solid. Rock solid.
I think that's fine. And I bet you, I'd like to see the details. I haven't looked at them yet. There's probably like, I would bet that only 3 of the, like at most 3 of those years are completely guaranteed. Like it feels like that's team option territory, right?
Right. I mean, and even if it isn't, like the last year's like a 10.1 million.
Yeah. What did the Nuggets pay Christian? Oh, to answer the Trey Mann question first, excuse me. Do you think he gets more? Like, he was so injured last year. He's
No,
looked pretty
no.
good in Charlotte when healthy.
He did, but the injury concern has to be major, and plus he's, he's. Is he a specialty player? I don't even know at this point.
I'm going to say this. I think he gets more, but it's for shorter. I think it might be like a 2-year deal.
Oh, that's a good way. Yeah, that's a good compromise.
Like 2 for 30 or something like that. I feel like that's where he might wind up. Legend of Oxperiment. What did the Nuggets pay Christian Brown after seeing what Naz Reid got paid and after seeing Kuminga seeking $30+ million? Their owners and GM said no core trades. I mean, first of all, I'll be shocked if Kuminga gets $30+ million. Someone made a huge mistake.
Yeah, same. But Christian Brown.
Yeah, I don't know if Naz Reid impacts the Christian Brown market at all. I think I'd more so look at the Jaden McDaniels deal, maybe the Trey Murphy deal. What does Keegan Murray get from the Kings in an extension? Might be that's like kind of a different position too.
Like between 24 and 27 million a year. That feels accurate.
Yeah, I mean if they get him for under $23 million a year, I'd be pretty surprised, wouldn't you?
Oh, that'd be a bargain.
Right. Just because at that point, if I'm him, I'm the archetype of player that teams might give an offer sheet out to in 2026. So I'm not.
Yep.
I'm probably $25 million. If I'm him, is probably the bare minimum I'd consider accepting.
I feel as though we kind of underrate or not talk enough about his season, like just his shot identification this year and like his conversion rate and him understanding when to take a shot, when not to take a shot.
And like even more importantly, doing that when Nikola Jokic is off the floor.
Yeah,
a lot more. Yeah, for sure.
He had such a good year.
Let's talk. It's kind of a somber conversation. The Indiana Pacers, one game away from winning the NBA title. 2, Mort's question of
time for a stopgap year. And this is the same situation for the Celtics, for the Bucks, with key guys on that same injury. For the Pacers specifically, they're in a tough spot because before the finals, I think it was leading into the finals, it was reported they were willing to go into the tax to keep Miles Turner. Have those plans changed? Are they kind of holding off a little bit? Are they looking to shed salary elsewhere to not pay the tax because Tyrese is presumably not going to play next year? I think there are a lot of questions there that are left unanswered, and you can play it differently. Like you can have the stopgap year, you can hit the big red reset button, which I don't think they will. But like, what is the approach here? Do they just fight through it, perhaps, instead, and just kind of say, okay, no Tyrese Halliburton, but we're just going to play the crap ton out of TJ McConnell and Andrew Nembhard, like, and then extend the minutes for Jarris Walker as well to have some more playmaking at the 3-4. Like, I don't know what their plan is. So, and it's also unfair to expect them to have a plan this soon because it just happened.
I kind of feel like, and like you kind of talked about mine a little bit, is like how does Hallie's injury impact how they plan to handle Miles Turner or their
I just stepped on you entirely. My apologies.
That's totally fine. No, I think they're inextricably tied together. If I were the Pacers, I think I might I pay Miles Turner, and if he costs you, let's just say $30 million. I don't know if that's a number they're comfortable with. That's the number that's been thrown around. You're kind of at that point, you could figure it out to where you're $10 to $15 million over the tax. Do you think that's money enough that you'd feel confident in being able to trim around the trade deadline if you're not having a good season? Or are you're looking at this season and saying, we don't have Halliburton, why would we ever enter the tax? And so we are going to just be out of the tax.
You're asking me to answer a question as if I'm a billionaire, which I'm very much not. My answer as an NBA analyst, observer, whatever.
You have like 9 million followers. That's not enough to
make
$1 billion.
At least. Would always be to pay the tax because I don't care what the fuck a billionaire pays in an NBA luxury tax. Fuck that. Like, if you own a basketball team, I think you're obligated to do whatever you can to put the best product on the floor. And if that means that one of your players is injured, tough shit to do it anyway. That's my personal perspective, but I also know that that's not reality. But I wouldn't care about going into the luxury tax whatsoever if I had billions upon billions of dollars. I wouldn't care. I would just go nuts.
Well, I think that's great in sort of gaga land, but we're operating in reality, and the team is thinking.
And that's why I don't think they will. Then you're asking me what I would do.
Well, who becomes the salary then? That are you just letting Miles? Are you signing and trading Miles Turner, or are you getting rid of Obi Toppin? Or
there we go. I think I'm
Toppin, you
breaking
think, just 'cause
Topping into like 2 contracts, and then I'm pivoting off like one half of that contract, perhaps.
and you know why that might be the move now? Because Obi Toppin's value has probably never been higher after what he did for them in the playoffs. And I recognize that he's so
Right.
core to their offensive identity, but if you still believe in Jarris Walker and you have Siakam and you have Turner, you could make the case that that's the way to go. And if you were to be able to trim salary as part of an Obi Toppin trade, now would be the actual time to probably do it.
And he would fit into the non-tax MLE exception if it was, right? 14.
Oh, he's only making 14-1?
He's making 14, and the non-tax MLE is projected to be 14-1, right?
I did not know he was so low. So he's
Yeah.
at 15. Oh no, he's at 14. You're right.
No, he's
Wow.
14 this year.
That's like almost like it was structured for this to happen.
And like a team out there should do that if they can get away with it.
Hey, he'd be a good fit in Detroit, right?
Oh, that's not a bad idea. I don't hate that.
Like Detroit doesn't have. If they're bringing back Beasley, they don't necessarily have the ability to.
Right,
Save.
you'd have to choose.
Well, it'd have to be Fontecchio. Fontecchio for Obi Toppin would work. So you'd save some money there. You're not saving the balance, but you're saving like what, 5 something. So maybe that's not enough. But do you think that you could send? Like, I think someone would probably take Fontecchio into their mid-level exception too. So like, I think the Pacers, if you wanted to, I bet you could probably get off of all of Obi Toppin's money.
Yeah.
Which is,
I wouldn't be too worried about
kudos to Obi Toppin and the Pacers, because the way that I even talked about that contract, I was not as hard about it as some. I thought it was too long if you were looking for it as a trade chip. And now it kind of looks like, oh, that deal will just be fine.
Right. Yeah.
Couple questions on the Pacers. PDP. What about Ben Mathurin, TJ McConnell, Ben Shepherd, and picks for Trey Murphy?
Oh, that's aggressive. I don't hate that.
I don't know. I'd have to see how many picks.
Yeah, right. It feels like that's.
Are you giving the Pelicans back the Pacers pick next year? That'd be really funny.
But you also get out of the Benedict Mathurin situation. And when I mean situation, I mean contractual situation. Because
I guess
would
New Orleans want to get in to the Benedict Mathurin business after getting?
I'm at this point where I'm just going to say Joe Dumars whenever we talk about the Pelicans.
I mean, I just can't. They're trading like a wing and a combo forward for a lot of guards to me in there. But look, if you include enough picks, maybe anything's possible. And like you said, Joe Dumars is just left and right out here making bad decisions. So.
I mean, Ben Shepherd, I actually would hate losing him if I'm losing Mathurin.
All right, if you're getting Trey Murphy, like
no, I'm nitpicking on that one for sure. But what I'm saying is, you
need a point guard
more
badly after that trade, though, right?
Yeah, you do.
But you would have are you cutting money as part of that deal? Those salaries, I don't even think that's not going to be enough for Trey Murphy.
I haven't really looked at that trade on.
Actually,
on the
Mathurin, McConnell, Shepherd might be able to make the money work, but like if you're the Pacers trying to stay out of the tax,
it feels like the Obi Toppin scenario that we outlined before is more realistic, at least.
Oh yeah, for sure. Berserk Monk says, does Mathurin automatically feast in extra points per game with Hallie out? If he goes into 22-plus points per game, what does that do for his new deal next summer? I will say that if you keep Benedict Mathurin and you're not making any other major changes on the roster, he is exponentially more important to the Pacers next year than he is this year. And that's why I think as Indy, if you're not planning on trading him, you're probably trying to get him on like what could turn into a team-friendly extension. Yeah. And then if you're Mathurin, you might never feel better about betting on yourself.
Right, because you're going to get all the shots, all the minutes. Like, you're probably going to lead the team in scoring next year. I mean, with all due respect to Pascal Siakam, but Siakam, I think, is more of a reader of the floor, where Mathurin is just like, let me go get buckets. So there's a reasonable chance that he averages 22, 23 next year.
That's also why, by the way, if you're looking to still, because the Pacers don't tank. Like, they have their own pick, and I think what a gap year should look like, one, I would embrace it. And so am I going full tank? That's not what they do when you have Siakam. If you're bringing back Turner, you just have a lot of good players. It's unrealistic. I'm managing everyone's load, and I'm not looking at, let's trade Siakam or something because he's going to be a year older when Halliburton comes back. That's how I would approach it, and I think that Obi Toppin feels like the name, even though I recognize that he's become a lot more valuable, because Benedict Mathurin's not making a crap ton anyway, so he's not getting you out of the tax necessarily, unless Miles Turner is signing for ultra cheap. He's not getting you out of the tax or close to it on his own, and you could roll the dice into restricted free agency, see what his market says, and he's just, like, Obi Toppin doesn't provide that raw scoring element that he does. That it feels counterintuitive to say that's what you need without Hallie, because that's not Hallie's DNA, but without his playmaking and pace setting, you need, like, someone who can just get buckets.
It's so funny, Dan, because the last video on my OnlyFans, I called managing everyone's load. It's great.
When I said that, I was like, that's a problematic phrasing
Yeah.
from me. Let's over under. If Bennedict Mathurin's on the Pacers to start next season, over under on his points per game. I'm going to set it at 19.5.
Over. Aggressively over.
All right, they play more of an egalitarian offense. I'm just asking questions. You're getting all bent out of shape over there.
I am. I know they are playing that type of offense, but look, without Hallie, like, they're going to have some main guys. And Mathurin, we know his play style. We're going to be looking at like 23. You should have set the over-under at like 22.5. That would have been funner.
Okay, 22.5. I'll take the under. I'll take the... Wow. You need to go find that bet and see what odds you can get for betting that Mathurin averages 23 points per game next season.
I mean, are we that... Okay. No,
I'm not down on him. I'm just
saying, I'm not saying down. I'm just saying, like, why
he is the
are
quintessential, we... didn't he, like, 25 points in, like, 12 minutes? That's definitely someone who, like...
He was averaging 19.4 points per game per 36 this season. And that was with Halliburton. Are we sure that he's not going to get up into, like, 4 or 5 more points per game raw?
I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just not going to predict it. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel pretty confident that it's going to be like 23 plus.
One more over under from Danny Menton. TJ McConnell assists per game over under 6.5. If he's
that
on the
number
Pacers,
should have been set at like 12.5.
He might be on the Pelicans when the Pacers acquired Trey Murphy. Let's not forget people.
Well, the over under, does TJ McConnell win the MVP? Should actually be the question.
Well, do people be calling when the Pacers like wind up winning 48 games? They're like, "Well, just trade Hallie. What do you need him for?" TJ McConnell just helped you do that.
TJ McConnell is
TJ McConnell and Bennedict Mathurin.
Who's going to lead the league in 9-foot pull-up jump shots next year?
I'd probably take. Well, will McConnell play enough to get? Because here's the thing: he might play more, but in theory, it might be harder for people to make shots without Hallie on the court. 6.5 is an interesting number. I might take the over if they're going to play him and he's your point guard and he's starting. Right. I'll take the over.
What about Nembhard though? Like Nembhard, like he was at 5 assists as like the secondary guy. He was playing 29 minutes per game. I assume he's going to play like 32, 33 minutes next season. He's probably going to be the starting lead guard, right?
So you're saying they're going to start Nembhard, Mathurin, Nesmith, Turner, and Siakam? I guess that would make sense. So who do you think leads the Pacers in assists per game next year, McConnell or Nembhard? You could probably throw Siakam into the mix if you really wanted to.
No, it's probably, you're right. You know what? It's probably still going to beat CJ somehow, some way.
I like that. I'm not going to map out how, but it'll happen. I agree with you.
No, but here's the thing. He's going to come off the bench, but this guy just gets shit done, right? And we don't know, like, the intricacies of this because if you, let's say Nembhard is playing the majority of his minutes with Mathurin. Mathurin is a guy who likes to dance, and he'll get into the paint. He'll get to the line a ton. You don't get assist off of free throws.
Well, the other thing you have to watch, too, is I know he's going to be 33. He is 33, excuse me. How many minutes is TJ McConnell playing next season? Because he cleared 30 minutes exactly once this past year.
Right.
He had 13 assists in that game, so if he's going to play 30 minutes, he's probably going to lead the league in assists. But, yeah, 6.5 might be ambitious for him. I'm gonna say it's Nembhard who ends up leading them in assists. I think playing time. Or maybe it's Tyus Jones.
Could be Tyus Jones. By the way, now we're on the subject of the Pacers. I don't think it's a hot take, but I do think we will see, a Christian Brown-esque leap from Jarris Walker.
I was going to say we might see that from Ben Shepherd.
Oh, interesting.
I hope, by the way, this is what I would do if I'm Indy, and this might be like a way to like wrap up the actual your overarching question. I might stay in the tax entering next season because like if you're not crossing any aprons at that point, the tax penalties have actually gotten a little cheaper in that bracket. And so if you need to get out of it at the trade deadline, or maybe it's a multi-step process where if you're not good, shave some salary at the trade deadline, shave some salary around the draft, and get it, because you're not going to be ultra deep into it. I might stay in and see how good I can be while also experimenting, because like go through these players. I understand they're a worse team without Hallie. There's like you can't. It's short of letting Miles Turner walk and trading Pascal Siakam. Like, what is the pathway? Like, a gap year might just mean, yeah, we're gonna get the 20th pick instead of like the 24th or the 25th. So I think that's what I'm doing as the Pacers. I would not be afraid, and I actually mean this as, like I said at the start, we need to operate in reality. But like the reality of it is like you could still maybe be pretty good in the East, and like it's not I guess it starts the repeater clock, so that might be something they're more cognizant of. So that's probably
or they're not going to partake in the money that the other tax teams are paying them. That's all. Like that's to me seems like that's the sticking point for so many teams.
Yeah, they're so not paying the tax, are they? I'm just mad. I would, or at least see. I go.
But that's the thing. The teams that just try to get under it, their motivation lies more so in wanting to share in the profit.
Yeah.
Perhaps, you know what? Perhaps that's a way to fight, the luxury tax stuff, that the tax bills don't get spread out, that it gets spent differently.
Yeah, like what would the distribution be, though, that fixes that?
Right. I don't know. But if that's your motivation, you have incentives not to pay for a contender or for a good team even. Like, it's one of the reasons why the aforementioned Bulls, for example, just don't want to pay the tax. Like, they never will. They have no intent to do so because they want to share in that profit. Like, if you take that away, what's their carrot?
You should maybe, like, if you don't make the playoffs for 3 consecutive seasons, you are ineligible to receive luxury tax distribution.
I fucking love that. That's smart.
We just fixed the NBA.
No, I'm not kidding. That's really, really smart because that's the best type of carrot there is. Like, you're not going to get, like, what, $11, $12 million every single year in luxury tax payments from other teams if you aren't trying to be competitive. That's a good one. I love that. I might actually fucking write about that. Yes.
Do it. That's buried. You should, because it's buried in like what's going to be a 120-minute podcast for 3 seconds. So no one's even going to notice that we said it.
Love that.
If you notice that we said it, hit us up in the comments.
No. You said it, and I'm going to give you credit as well because that's not my idea. That's your idea, and it's a fucking good one.
You know what you can do to thank me? Everybody join our Discord and subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already.
I'm so glad you said Discord, not OnlyFans, because that was trending in all the wrong directions.
Hey, we got to manage loads over here. Our final team, Mort's about to start a war, I believe. The Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah.
Hit me with your question, Mr. Jensen.
Right. Look, we have to get into it. I mean, I understand Bucks fans, by the way. Let me just preface that before I get, slandered.
Like linguistically, morally, emotionally. What do you mean?
Everything.
You
Look, just before I get murdered, honestly, I would like to see Giannis Antetokounmpo finish his career in Milwaukee. Let me get that out of the way ASAP. That would be a fantastic story. I want him to have one of those one franchise Tim Duncan careers. That would be great. But I feel as though we've reached that point where we're so in love, we're so infatuated with the idea that he has to stay there. We're just shutting our eyes at the fact that the Bucks have just become, like, they've painted themselves into a corner so aggressively that we're really struggling to see, how they get out of it. And right now in Bucks land, there's this idea of the stopgap year and how it magically is going to solve everything. And while I understand the raw idea of, all right, we're going to take a step back for 1 year, accumulate some assets, fine. My question here is, first and foremost, is that a plan? Is that, like, does that make sense? Like, okay, so you accumulate assets, you probably send that out for, plus Dame's expiring or whatever, for like a secondary star. Great. Then you have Giannis, you have a secondary star, and then you have Butkus. You have nothing. Like, is that going to lead to another real attempt at a championship? Probably not, because as we've seen this year, the NBA has leaned into depth And it's so crucial to have that, especially in playoff context. So I feel as though when anyone now just suggests, should the Bucks entertain the idea of trading Giannis, we're just met with this very aggressive, no, it's a complete non-starter. It's dumb. It's not dumb. You have to look under every rock if you're an NBA organization. You have to explore every damn avenue, especially if you painted yourself into a corner like you have. I'm not proposing that they should preemptively just get the fuck out of here, Giannis. Obviously not. But to close that door entirely and then shut your eyes, wish upon a magic star that the gap year is going to fix it all, I don't think that's a plan, Dan.
So I both agree and disagree. So what I agree on is yes, as an NBA team, you need to turn over every rock. What I would say, though, is Giannis is so good that unless he actually asks for out, and particularly when you don't control your own draft pick again until 2031, right? You keep him. And what I will say, though, is this idea of a gap year for them is not actually a thing. It's just a season with Damian Lillard injured. That because you don't control your own draft pick, and I like Ryan Rollins. Say what you want about Andre Jackson. Like, this is not a team that, is Kevin Porter Jr. going to come back? Throw all the names you want at me. The upside of I like AJ Green, too. I actually think he's probably, Ryan Rollins comes pretty close, but he's probably their best player, or best young players. AJ Green's the Bucks' best player. Screw you.
I was about to say, that's another can of worms.
So I don't think a gap year. I don't think that you're going to.
We can rename it if it's not a gap year, but
it's
understand
a break in title contention because a gap year. I think you could call it a gap year, but it doesn't have the traditional benefits of a gap year, to where a gap year isn't waiting for more tradable first round picks to be unlocked. It's like going through a gap year so that you maximize the value of that year's pick, and you have this really palatable asset in trade talks. So I just don't like the way it's being framed. Is you could develop guys around Giannis, and some of them will probably get better, and they can be a part of a rotation of a really good team. So there's merit to doing that. And if you think that Damon's going to come back and be really good, or you think you could turn his expiring contract and 3 first-round picks into a player who, along with Giannis, you believe is good enough to where you're just kind of fleshing out the roster with odds and ends or whoever you have. Because let's just assume they will have, because my question is, can they make upgrades without tapping into their first rounders, which is, it's really first rounder, but you can trade swaps and a first. If they use the mid-level exception, the biannual this year, okay, maybe you get guys that could be a part of the longer-term rotation, but it's just, I do agree that the situation is relatively unspectacular, but if Giannis is willing to see it through and see what it turns into, I don't know why you would trade him.
And that's fair. That is fair. But I do think as an organization, you still need to look out for your own interest. But if that best interest, is to keep Giannis there because of the relationship with the fans, that's fair.
When would it be in the Bucks' best interest to trade Giannis without him asking for out? Because I'll follow it up with this. It's not just about you don't control your pick. Let's just say you're worried about the return. Do we think that you're going to get materially less for Giannis next summer than you are this summer?
No, the trade value is going to remain. But I will say this. If you're trading a player of Giannis's caliber, you can actually tell teams or a team, if you can get us our own picks back, it's a conversation. You can aim for the moon here. You can ask for literally everything.
Yeah, but you could do that at any point. And I'll say here's, short of one team going to Portland and New Orleans and now Atlanta and just getting all of the Bucks picks and then cornering the market on those.
Right.
I just think this is a situation where Giannis is reportedly monitoring their free agency and offseason. This is a situation where you follow it through until Giannis says otherwise, and you try and maximize the time around him. But I do agree with you in the sense that this idea of a gap year, doing something profound internally for what's already in place, that's not a thing. That is what I would disagree with. Is yes, AJ Green might get better. Ryan Rollins, assuming he's back, might get better. Ditto for Andre Jackson. Those are not like, what do you think those guys are going to turn into in this gap year that is going to make you feel holistically better
Right.
about the Bucks' chances moving forward? This gap year would be about getting Giannis to sign on so that you can let this spill into next offseason when you would be able to trade, because they'll have a pick, a least favorable pick next year. So you trade that pick, then you can trade 2031 and 2033 with a 2032 swap.
Right.
Then you see what you could attach that to Dame. Maybe Kyle Kuzma's still on the roster. Sure, that's what you're waiting for. That's what this is about to me, more so than, man, imagine if Ryan Rollins is the next, like, I don't know, like, who's the Ryan Rollins comp? I'm trying to think of what his off, like, defensively. Yeah, I'll throw out a bunch of names. Like, what are you hoping, or who are you hoping he turns into on the offensive end? I guess is really the.
That's a good one. Oh, a more like a better ball handling Gary Neal.
Oh my God. Can he get 3-pointers up like Gary Neal?
Gary Neal, if he had better ball handling, Dan, would have been freaking good. That was a compliment. That's not like, I wasn't trying to like say anything negative. Quite the contrary. That's a compliment. That's meant as a compliment. Gary Neal knew how to get shots up. He was limited by the fact that he was not a great ball handler.
Yeah, I guess, it feels like their games are played at such a different cadence. What about like Trey Mann with more defense?
I like that too. And probably a little bit more under control than Trey Mann as well.
Right. And that's a really good player. So like if that's what you have, awesome. Rotation player on a really good team. But not trading Giannis, I think, is more about your own draft situation for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's about him just being a generational icon. And why would you follow it through until you can't anymore? And it's also just he hasn't asked for out, so I'm trying to leave the door open as long as possible if I'm Milwaukee.
I will say this. If they follow through on the idea of a quote-unquote gap year, and they want to accelerate the youth movement and the effects of the youth movement, I think it's pretty crucial that they look at Kyle Kuzma and just either sit down with him before the season and go, look, you have to play a more team-oriented game, or just flat out preemptively get him out of there. Because the worst thing that can happen next year is Kuzma taking up those opportunities. He was so horrid. He was so horrid for him. I don't know what the hell happened last year, also in Washington for that matter. That was just a god-awful year of basketball from him. And like, I could be kind and say, hey, look, he's probably going to bounce back. Is he? Like, the IQ there is just not like basketball IQ. Sorry. Very important to flesh that out. Is not all the way up there. It's a bad shot selection on most nights. The defense goes in and out, and it's like, it's stark degrees. I just don't trust him to kind of not spoil the product in many ways of a mission of a gap year.
We've seen him play better, and that's also kind of like why if you could trade him right now, like, you almost have to wonder, do you? Because he's just at the nadir of his value, probably.
Yeah. And it's never great to do that. I agree. But like, what if he plays like crap again? Then what?
I do agree with the fact that just because Dame's out, Middleton's not there, if you don't have like an established pecking order of someone who is, like, aside from Giannis, going to eat up shots, like Kyle Kuzma could just, like, that could be a license for him to go buck wild. And so, yeah,
yes.
you need to make sure that he's kind of on the same page. And I think a big start of that is part of the appeal for Giannis is getting to play like point center or point forward, whatever you want to call it. So that would be a huge list. Okay, if you're trying to infringe upon what Giannis is doing, they will tell you to take the ball and go home. So I'm not too worried about the Kuzma thing, other than it does tie back to my question that was like, how do you improve this team? Because you have Giannis, and maybe the East has like 3 or 4 teams that you can say, oh, we believe. It's probably, if you to get, how many teams do you guarantee Giannis is on the Bucks are going to be better than Milwaukee right now next season?
How many teams I guarantee?
In the East. Like, would it be more than 3?
So let's see. Cleveland, New York, Orlando. I probably still have Boston. Oh, not probably. I still have Boston. Again, we don't know if Boston's done. Like, you're asking me before free agency and before potentially a bunch of trades. But like, as of today, right now, I have Boston over them as well. Atlanta might be close too.
Yeah. So I mean, but look, so you're going to be in the mix, in the top 6 mix for sure.
Oh, Detroit.
Detroit, yeah, right. Like there's again, but it's a matter of guaranteeing, and I think like
Right.
after New York and Cleveland, I get a little iffy because I could kind of see like the rug being pulled out from underneath a bunch of those teams. There's a scenario, at least. But the point is, you're going to be competitive. Like, how do you get better here without tapping into first? And it's just, I know we've mentioned a lot about or people have mentioned the non-taxpayer mid-level, the biannual. So now you've decided that Brook Lopez is gone. And like, unless you're making some other type of move to preserve that flexibility, maybe that's fine. But like then I guess Giannis is playing. If Portis comes back, Giannis is still going to have to play a bunch of center unless you're really just like dusting off Jericho Sims.
Right. See, and that's another thing that I'm worrying about for next season too. Because Giannis doesn't really have that off switch. He's sort of like, the MVP version of Alex Caruso. Like he goes 100% all the time. And are we are we, as if we're the Bucks? Are the Bucks unintentionally, of course, putting him in a situation where he might be severely overtaxed and thus more susceptible to injury?
Oh man, whenever a 30-year-old with his type of just physiological makeup is there, I'm always going to worry about it. But I think that's part of the gap. Now, if you want to say a true gap year, it's Giannis. You play 30 minutes a night and then you're done or something. That's what would be in the spirit of a gap year.
I would support that. Yeah.
What I was kind of wondering is, I don't know what's going to happen with, I mean, and it could have been happening now as like we're recording this. I don't know what's going to happen with the Bobby Portis player option, but I was wondering, just because Boston's looking to trim a crap ton of money, can you grease the wheels of trading, let's say, Pat Connaughton into someone's non-tax mid-level or into Brooklyn's cap space without using a first, send Bobby Portis to Boston, who could use a big if he opts in, I'm assuming, and then get Anthony Simons here?
That's creative. And Simons would be, offensively speaking, not defensively, but offensively speaking, would be a wonderful fit because he can mimic so many of the actions of Dame while obviously not being Dame.
The problem is, and I think you would be okay with it just based off if you're giving up your 20, like, is it your 2032 second enough to get someone to take on Connaughton for the year?
That's the one I wanted to circle back on because, like, let's just jump back to the implication or not the assumption that someone just takes Pat Connaughton. Like, I don't know if a second is enough. A couple seconds, maybe.
Do they? I should look at what picks they have available.
Yeah, I don't even know how many they have left. Let's see.
I will say I'm not giving up a first round pick or swap to do it. Does it bother you at all though? Because it's like, okay, you're viewing Simons as probably a rental in that scenario because you don't want to. Well, I guess if you're trading Dame next offseason, Simons is pretty young. You can maybe even look at bringing him back. So like that's, and look, his spacing around Giannis, I would love that. That's why I was like thinking of. I kind of thought of like some maybe 3-and-D wing placeholders, whether it was like Andrew Wiggins.
Right.
I think if they put their distant first on the table, by the way, they could probably get a Cam Johnson. I'm just not. If the plan is to go all in next summer, I'm just not touching my first round stash was the goal here. So yeah, they have Utah's pick in 2026, which is they're probably going to.
We're skirting over something.
Go ahead.
We're talking about like when Dame returns. It feels like we're just glossing over, like it's an Achilles tear for someone who is just about to turn 35. Can we just cover real quick what kind of state do we anticipate Damian Lillard being back in?
I think one, if you're viewing him as like a player for this team, that's a huge question that I don't think you can have an answer for.
Right.
But from the Bucks' perspective, I think they view him as like a massive expiring salary. They would then look to move attached to those picks, which is why Simons is interesting because if you're moving Dame, bringing back Simons makes a ton of sense. I'm talking about after this year. But I mean, it's an Achilles tear for someone in his mid-30s. What are we supposed to expect? I don't know what to expect when Tatum comes back.
Right, and it's also heavily implicated that with both Tatum and Halliburton, that one thing is the full missed year, and then the second year, that's when they like get back into the rhythm of things. So it's actually not a 1 year thing; it's more like an 18-month thing. That just gets even tighter with Dame.
Yeah, I mean it does, but again, it's 1 year, and so if you're getting off And they're
Right.
giving, I mean, Bucks, if the Bucks next year are trading, giving you the rights to 2031, 2032, and 2033 to outright one swap, my God, I think that you could probably do something pretty spot. I don't know what, but there'll be a team out there that would, like Dame is, it's a lot of money, but he'll be available, and it's for a year. I did think.
All right. Yeah. Who's the player?
Now you're asking me to zoom. I wanted to ask you something very quickly first.
Oh, sorry. Go
Would
ahead.
you trade just straight up? I mean, you have to make the math work maybe somehow. If you're the Bucks and he's willing to waive his no trade clause, do you trade Dame for Bradley Beal?
Oh, it feels as though Bradley Beal has become like the impersonation of like desperation. You get that immediate return, but I don't even know how good he is anymore because he's played 2 years in Phoenix where he's kind of been hidden away. If he comes back to a team where he has this high volume role, is he going to be like the Wizards version of Bradley Beal, who was always kind of overrated, if you ask me? So we can still do the whole thing as we can with Dame, where going into the final year of his contract. Well, no, because the no trade clause transfers, right?
Yeah, it would transfer. So he's still
Then no. Then no. Yeah, no. Hell no.
Maybe if Phoenix stockpiles enough shooting guards, he would agree to relinquish his no trade clause as part of getting to the Bucks.
Yeah, but if that just so can he remove it like permanently from his contract after having made it to the Bucks?
Yeah, I believe he can. We can check with Keith Smith, but I'm pretty sure that he could.
If they can do that, that changes the mathematics a little bit from my end. Yes.
So who's the player is what you asked. So I'll throw out a couple.
That was harsh. My apologies, because I'm asking you to name like one guy. What I'm asking you actually is what echelon of player?
I think at a bare minimum, it would have to be in the Lowry Marketing ballpark.
Is that enough? Like that ballpark? Not Lowry Marketing specifically, but a player in that ballpark?
Well, maybe that's the player who doesn't cost you like every single pick is part. I mean, I don't know. He probably would. So, I mean, what about LaMelo Ball?
You're asking me. Okay. Obviously, I'm not interested in LaMelo. You know how I stand on that. But in that echelon of player, in terms of just the raw production level, I get what you're trying to sell here. I want someone who can actually stay on the floor, though. I think that's pretty important.
Well, I'll try to get into names. These are all. What about Anthony Davis? Maybe the Mavs are like reorienting around Cooper Flag next summer.
So it'd be Giannis and Anthony Davis, and then like
Anthony Simons.
See, that's the thing. So let's say they actually get two guys in there, just for argument's sake. Let's say LaMelo Ball, right? So Giannis, LaMelo, and then they still have Simons, I guess, in the scenario.
Yeah, the scenario where we had them trade for Simons from Boston and get Connaughton into Brooklyn or another team's.
Okay,
exception.
well, and he's an expiring, so he'll be on a new deal at that point, Simons, if we assume he's being re-signed. So how do they get the depth? Because let's say I buy Giannis, LaMelo, Anthony Simons as your top three guys.
And then you're assuming, they use the MLE this year. Like maybe that gets them Gary Trent Jr. back, which maybe in that case you're wondering why would they want Simons, but I think he's got a little bit more creation to him than Gary Trent Jr.
So they have
and my God, could you imagine Giannis being dotted by Gary Trent Jr. and Anthony Simons? You're playing without a point guard anyway. Put Ryan Rollins on the floor. We got three guys right there. I don't know who we've given up Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton in that scenario, but yeah.
And where's Kuzma in all this?
I mean, he's still on your books.
Look,
he becomes an expiring contract too after this season, though.
Yeah. See, this is what I've been missing from, Bucks people. This conversation where it's really where we go into the weeds about it and where we kind of, extend our minds a little bit. Like, how do we actually get there? Because now there's like an outline, I think, of a plan that makes on some level sense. But everything I've seen has always been, gap year automatically, like back in the swing of things. This is more like it. If you can make some of those smaller trades as like a stepping stone piece to a guy. And when I say a guy, I don't necessarily mean a star. I thought your example of Anthony Simons is right on the money. That's a guy. That's a good player, but he's not a star. He's star adjacent, if we're being kind, somewhere along those lines.
And by the way, the other thing that they could try and do is like, can you recoup any other assets? Like, because you don't have anyone on your books that's worth a first round pick, I would think, on their own. But like, if you were willing to sign and trade Brook Lopez somewhere,
right
now that team becomes hard capped. Like, could you get a swap? Could you get a first round? But like, if the Lakers, they're not under the first apron. But like, as a theory, would the Lakers give you a pick or a swap for Brook Lopez? Is there another team out there that would consider, like, that would be another avenue to consider? Or maybe it's just a matter of we're taking on money that's worse this year and it's still expiring, or it has no worse than, like even just the Lakers as an example. Like, if the Bucks were willing to take on, who has like 2 years left on their deal with the Lakers, that's just sort of like meh money, or maybe it's more empty money. Like, could you get compensated for if the Lakers wanted Bobby Portis and were giving you Maxi Kleba, just as an example? It's like, what are they giving you to go from that? I think the Bucks' gap year is unconventional. So I just don't like it. The phrasing is wrong, and you're right. There's probably been a lack of context. I've seen too much of it built around you use the mid-level, use the BAE, and you have these young guys, and like that's how you bring yourself back. I think it's really more about, can you position yourself to open/acquire more assets, and then what can you turn those assets into? But I also think an important part of it is, what can you do? Is there anything you can do to reorient the, like in Anthony Simons' deal? I don't know if that's feasible, but if Boston's really looking to cut money, if they just have to take back Bobby Portis for Anthony Simons in that multi-team construction, that saves them what? Like another 12.5 million before taxes. So that's that's what I think of when I'm thinking of the 25-26 Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis.
I do have like a wild thing out here. Like it's I don't know if I trust it, and I haven't really calculated this perfectly yet. So going into 2026, assuming it's Giannis and Dame on the books, that's 58. What's that? That's almost 120 million. What's the cap going to be next year? Presumably, like projected.
Next year's number, so the 25-26 cap, right? I mean,
no,
the 26-27 cap.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's going to be 170.1 million.
So that's just short of being able to offer a max, right?
Well, but you have to factor in minimum roster charges. There's going to be other,
right. That's the thing. But it's like even if you disregard all of that, it's still like it still comes in short.
Yeah, you could have, like, if they really just emptied the roster of every salary and they replaced it with rookie minimums, like 1.3 million, whatever that number, like the 0-year experience, you could have like it'd be less than 40 million in cap space at that point, which is just
well. See, that's the issue. So basically, you have to, you have to almost trade Dame. It's like because you know where I'm going here. You know where I'm going.
Yeah, Luka Doncic. I know where you're going. So you would have to wipe off Dame's money somehow, like make it cheaper. But I think
and Kyle's.
I think what is the important number for the Bucks is, so the second apron in 26-27 is 228.6 million. Like, that's what we're assuming they want to stay under. So you do have some wiggle room, like to retain talent that you might get this year, or to just, if you're making a big swing. So I understand the appeal. I really think, I'm just curious to see, I look at it this way. I don't think Giannis is going to request a trade this offseason. He would have to really sit there, and think they're not going to be able to do anything next summer. But I think early on next summer, leading into the draft, like that's kind of the inflection point for me. Maybe he does request a trade this summer, but I don't know. I think that's what.
Or by the deadline.
Man, if he gets moved mid-season.
Well, I mean, no. Like he might demand it at the deadline. Like he might play, half a season and just like, oh, this is just off the rails. This isn't working, and he's looking at like the projection of next year, and then he says, no, there's no way.
This is all to say, for me at least, I don't see like a high percentage path back to being a viable title contender as the Bucks, kind of no matter what happens or what they do next summer.
Right.
But I do see, like, when you map out all these different things, and a lot of them you have to get lucky, it has to go right, you have to nail these signings this summer, any trades that you have to nail them. I could see a team that is good enough to convince Giannis to stay a little bit longer. And that is the purpose of the gap year. Because to me, if I'm the Bucks, it's not about actually winning another title for Giannis or being one of the two best teams in the conference or the league. It's how do I get good enough to entice this guy to stay and ride this out for another 2 years. So you're almost buying yourself. What's appealing for a gap year for the Bucks is if Giannis is on board, you've bought yourself another season of Giannis.
Right.
And so it's how do I buy another season? Like it feels like that's how they're gaming this situation.
You know what? You actually just managed to unearth what it is that I've been unable to word this the right way, but I think you just kind of triggered something in my mind that now makes me think why I'm slightly annoyed with this situation. It's the assumption of Giannis's continued goodwill. I think that's the thing, where everyone's like, oh, but he loves it here. Like he's gonna stay. He wants to do this, and like yes, but he's also a competitive freak. He absolutely wants to win, and I think it's the assumption that no, this is fine. This is fine. That's what
I have not. To be fair, I've not seen a lot of Bucks fans thinking that it's. Fine.
I have. It's like, oh no, why would he leave? It's like, well, because he's
there's a why.
Highly competitive. Yeah, exactly.
There's a clear why. It's just whether he wants to, capitalize on that. And I could see, look, the emotional component here absolutely matters, and it's what matters anymore. Getting that title is massive when it comes to this discussion because he will always have that championship.
Great.
Yeah.
Like they've done great building up like that emotional cachet or whatever you want to call it. Like they should be credited for that. That's why we're even having this discussion. I just think it's the continued assumption that, oh yeah, like it's fine. That just bothers me because obviously we've seen before with so many other players, if they're stuck in a situation where the team has no maneuverability whatsoever, like they're sitting there going, hey, what's the plan? Like, Domantas Sabonis, who is a significantly inferior player to Giannis Antetokounmpo, is like asking the Kings for a sit-down going, guys, what are we doing? Like, I just think it's reasonable for someone of this caliber to be skeptical. And I think it's the feeling of dismissiveness I think I see from the fan base that just irks me the wrong way.
I think it's a complicated discussion to have. I think is really what it is. And it can only be done in forums that allow for like extended debate like this did.
Right.
And I think we did it justice to mapping out all the different. I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm rooting for Giannis to stay in Milwaukee. I like that. I'm still romantic in that respect, but I also like seeing the best players play like on the biggest stages and not markets. I mean like deep into the playoffs, just to be clear.
You're certainly romantic in the OnlyFans comment section. Yes.
I paint some vivid pictures in those OnlyFans comment sections,
yes.
don't I? Mort, I think. Do you have anything to add? We just did 2 hours on Central Division teams.
No, I think we got it covered. I really appreciate like the Giannis breakdown. Honestly, I think that was nice. I think that was necessary because you're absolutely right. This isn't one of those. It's Camp A or Camp B.
Look,
this is a situation full of nuance.
This is, you guys want deep cuts and peeks behind the curtain about this. Is Grant and I talk about this all the time when we're trying to structure our content. The hyper localization of, let's say, NBA coverage specifically, and I mean this as a compliment. And I've said this to when I have people on for the season look at it. It's gotten so good and it is so saturated that people like you and me are just going to be more casually dismissed by fans of that team because we're not going to provide the same, we're not going to have the same emotional attachment, so we're not going to provide that component of the coverage, and then we're not covering that team as intimately. What I will say is like this podcast is built to be like we're just here for vibes and fun. We want to have fun and like not get heated, but like we are, when you talk about toxic national coverage, like talking about Giannis's future and what we just did is not it. Like, if you don't want the Stephen A. Smith yelling and it's the same debate over and over again, like, we're the alternative to that. I still believe, and I've kind of seen that. I don't think people believe that there's as much of a place for people covering the entire NBA. I'm just using this specifically. And I think that there is. And I think that this podcast, your podcast, like, we straddle that line of trying to do it, like, try to come from a genuine place. We're wrong all the time, but, like, we have, and I'm going to say this, we have a better snapshot view of the entire league and of these situations at large than some of like the localized content because we're more removed from it. They can work in service together. And
yes,
having
it's so
these
crucial.
discussions, I would say having these discussions, if you want to boil it down to like the Bucks should just trade Giannis, they're going nowhere. It's just more complicated than that. Like if that's your stance and the Bucks owned all their draft picks moving forward, it's easier to justify. Right now, when he hasn't asked for out, there's not much of a leg to stand on. So hopefully everybody enjoyed that debate more. Tell them where they can find you and all the non-OnlyFans content that you could put out.
Right. Well, you can find me over at Yahoo Sports. You can find me at Forbes. And then the NBA podcast. I love how you said that my podcast, your podcast, it's basically become one podcast lately over the past 3 months. It's the same pod, same episodes, more or less. Where
Yahoo, Forbes.
Yahoo. Yeah, I said Yahoo Sports, Forbes, obviously the NBA podcast. If you speak Danish, buzzer beater. And then you can also find me at Blue Sky at MSJ NBA.
And until next time, just as a reminder, if you made it all the way to the end of this, Grant and I will be hosting Bleacher Report the live free agency show on Monday. It'll be in their app and YouTube channel from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time. That's
without
10 a.m.
me?
I know. Look, we were bumped from the primetime spot. We did the 6 to 10 block last year. I believe we've been bumped unless they're just breaking it down into 2-hour slots. So,
and
we're
here
moving
I
on.
wanted to do a free agency show.
We're succeeding downward. Is that because I still think we're doing pretty good, but we're succeeding downward. Until next time, and as always, I give you the shout out to the one, the only, the player who can actually make the Bucks' gap year worth it, both during the gap year and after the fact, Mr. You know it, Mort. His name, Frank